You're first. Has that ever happened in the history of
Yes, 2 o'clock. I didn't know what else it was.
Yeah. Okay.
He's got
Well, I did. Yes. I asked. Yeah. 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 Okay. Are you going on the tour?
There's 2 different ones. There's one with
Well, I didn't tell him about that. I didn't know about it.
somebody posted it.
There's quite a few tours. He had sent me like
Who's that?
I just sent an invitation to come so that he can How'd you make it tonight?
good. Good start. Tina just gave me the eye. What's that?
Sherry's up first.
Sherry's up first. Ready to go? All right, I guess we'll get going. Good evening, everybody. Public Works and Effective Services Committee meeting is first tonight. As Councillor Shukin mentioned, this is the first time in my history, even 4.5 years almost, that we got to go first. So we do have a paint to add to the agenda, which we are going to put under other business. So that will go under 10A, the paint that has come in from the fire chief. So with the addition of that, could I have approval of the agenda? So moved. Moved by Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? All right, public participation, anyone wishing to speak. And I do also want to acknowledge that we're sharing the land with our neighbors and friends of the First Nations. Thank you.
Good evening, Brent Donaldson, Chelster Court. I'm speaking to the training tower tonight. One of my jobs before I retired at Sanders Fire Department, I was the training and staff development officer and worked on a training center at number 2 Hall, which this is where the tower is coming from. In that process, we went through a public hearing and some of the height issues were dealt with by painting the tower actually green. The construction of the tower itself complies with structural engineering as well as WorkSafe BC. It was built about 15 years ago, and certainly to replace that, I would think it would be several $100,000. I think it's a great asset. Certainly, I think it is a gift, so I strongly urge you to consider it. And if you don't use it as a training tower, maybe you can put it on your side and we can have it as a bridge on Flesh Road.
Thank you.
Hi, Metchosin resident. I just want to say I think the pedestrian activated light for we're at near Kangaroo and Rocky Point where the Galloping Goose crosses is brilliant, and I want to thank Councillor for her efforts on that.
Thank you. It is going to be brilliant. It's very exciting to finally get it going. Would anybody else wish to speak?
Is it just Public Works, or can you speak out on anything?
It's just Public Works tonight, and then we're going to be followed by the Planning Committee, and maybe, I'm not sure which one is next, and the Environmental Committee, so.
And you have another,
Each one of them will have an opportunity to speak, so whatever you want to speak about, wherever it kind of fits in a slot would be the best spot.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Moving on then, we have adoption of the minutes of the meeting from May 8th.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Schicken. All in favor? Thanks. And then we need a motion for receipt of the minutes of the Healthy Community Advisory Select Committee of May 24th.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Schicken, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Okay. It was great after a very, very long break to actually have the Healthy Communities Committee back on track again. There's some new faces on the committee and lots and lots of ideas. If anybody happened to read the minutes, it was great, very exciting. So I'm sure there'll be some really interesting things coming forward in the next while. All right, on reports, we have a report from the Metchosin Fire Department, and ask the Fire Chief Dunlop to please come up and talk a bit about her very well written report.
Chief Dunlop, 4440 Happy Valley Road. Yeah, I'm just here to answer any questions you might have, and I wanted to point out a couple of things on our report. We ran 65 calls in the month of May, which is significantly increased from what it used to be around 30 to 32 was our average. Very limited open burn complaints. So definitely more medicals for sure, but we're getting more and more of just miscellaneous assistance and fires and alarm bell calls, that sort of thing as well. So one of the issues that we are running into, we may think that drug overdose is a big city problem, but it's not. It's a Metchosin problem. In the month of May, crossing into April, May kind of time frame, in our own municipality, we've had 8 overdoses. So that's a pretty high number for our population here. So if we think that it's not happening here, it is happening here, and we never know. Any medical call we go to for a sick person could easily be an overdose. So it is a very real local problem. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Do you have any, what as a community, do you have any ideas about what we can do to help out with the overdose problem? I mean, I know it is from the workshop that we went to, a couple of us went to a while back. It's such a hidden issue.
Unfortunately, I really don't. Just if we know if there's somebody that does have a concern or a problem, is to seek assistance. Especially, to be clear, it's not all just drugs, illicit use of what we think of drugs. Sometimes it's just overdose of people who are just depressed or with mental health issues too. So that's that combination of those two items together are what are really causing our concerns here. So I don't have a direct answer. It's not something we actually are able to get and deal with people who might have addiction issues. But certainly if you know of somebody, to reach out for help. There's all kinds of resources available. There's some RCMP dropped off some really great brochures up at the front desk here. And also we have some at the fire hall as well.
Council, any questions? Councillor.
Thanks, Councillor, through you. So Chief, there was a lot of work done on addressing the province and I think it's called the CRM, the Call Response Management, is that correct? Bring back our calls, sort of. Has that had an impact on your world and the increase in calls?
Yes. What we were aiming for was to bring back all of our calls from the very minor, not transport only calls, but very minor calls to very severe calls, which we have group managed to get that back. So that's what we're doing now. So yes, there's definitely that reflection there. As far as the volunteers go, it's great because they love getting to know the community. We spend an average of 34 minutes on scene with every patient prior to ambulance getting there. And that's an average. So there are some over there 2 hours, some over 10 minutes, right? So that's a lot of time to build a rapport and a relationship, and also be there to comfort and care. Imagine having something very scary happening and just waiting for an ambulance to get there. So it's been a great program for us.
All right. Mary,
I was interested, thank you through the chair, I was interested in the hazmat training that you did with Central Saanich. Can you explain that in a little?
Sure. So I'm not sure if you're aware that part of the greater CRD is the CRD Regional Hazmat Team. It's a very unique team because it's made up of all the South Island, if you will, fire departments that have a technician, a hazmat technician. So that's a certain level of training that you get. I've been on the team since its inception, which is, I'm going to say 14 years ago now, something like that. So I'm a team lead with that. And it's sort of like when there's a hazmat call where a local department needs additional resources, so it's a severe incident, hazmat incident, they do the pagers and all of us respond from wherever we happen to be to that location. And then we do our hazmat tech stuff and we wear the suits and go in and do whatever we need to do to make sure the situation is safe. So it's very cool. I'm actually the only female on the team, and I'm also the only fire chief on the team, so that kind of puts me in a really awkward position sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Well done.
yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just going back to the overdoses and sometimes it is mixing medication and alcohol and stuff like that. I'm just wondering, because we did go to that really informative workshop and we brought back some literature, that we maybe do a bit of a campaign to say that there is some information, or at least some resources, and one of the places maybe is on the marquee as an awareness that, here's a phone number, here's places to help or to reach out to. There's a lot of stigmatism to go with it, unfortunately, but the more we start seeing this, it starts to open up those doors a little bit.
Yeah, we were thinking about doing kind of I won't say marketing campaign, but an information campaign, if you will, and doing a naloxone training session and getting the websites together so there's some links there for people, anonymous, helplines, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where we're going. It's just a matter of time to get that coordinated.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yes, really.
I'm also attending that conference that they advertised on the overdose crisis in Vancouver. I think it's June 23rd, 22nd as well, so I'll be able to bring some more information back regarding the Leadership United group who gave us this workshop that Councillor Dawn Sinep and I attended.
That's awesome. I would like to throw out there kudos to Chianu because they haven't had an overdose there in over a year now. So that's really well done on their behalf.
What did they do to help mitigate that?
They just were persistent. They started a security and they just let people who were bringing in drugs, let them know they weren't welcome there.
Wow.
That's really what it came down to.
Well, that's excellent.
Yeah, very cool.
All right, see more questions, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the councillor's update. Going to go through everything. Obviously, our public works crew is still hard at it, as usual. School working group, we've had, it says the most recent applications and proposals for the RFP to renovate the gym and build the washrooms are in, and the group and the CAO is going to bring our, the decision to the next council meeting on the 19th. And I did want to mention to the working group, because there's a bit of misconception about it, like the fire hall working group and the dogs and Metchosin working group are all quite large groups. This actually, working group is probably not a very good name for it, because it's more just an ad hoc group. There's only 4 people on the committee, and that is the fire chief, and Johnny Carline, Gary Smurfett, and myself. So, I have brought reports to committee when we have had meetings, and they haven't been all that regular, sometimes just when we sort of need to meet. So at any rate, just wanted to explain that a bit. As far as MACA, the next big event will be July 1st from 3 to 9 p.m. outdoors. They're going to have some vendors and entertainment and food, and I think a Canada Day cake, as far as I know. The Seniors Association, a very successful Parisian cafe again this year, and the weather cooperated quite well. It's a bit windy with the tablecloths blowing off as usual, but at least it wasn't raining like it was last year. And the tour of the CREST sites was very informative, especially the e-com center, where the people are sitting at their tables taking the 911 calls and dispatching the police calls. It was really interesting. And the Arts Commission Summit as well. Another thing I did have is a kind of a booze and bouquets session, and the booze are for the people that are dumping things, not just around the neighborhood, but most recently the massive amount of building material that was left by the metal bin. I mean, as volunteers are handling all that stuff there, and it's just really awful that there's just that much kind of dumping going on. And another one is yesterday when I was driving down the road to see that our radar speed sign on Rocky Point Road had been KO'd again. And I don't know if it's been damaged or not. Last time it was quite expensive to get it fixed, and it's just really, we're trying to keep people in the community safe, and it's just very upsetting. So if people do see or hear of anyone who is doing those kind of things, if you could let the RCMP know or let staff here know, it would be really helpful to try to cut down on some of it. And my bouquet is to the amazing volunteers at the Metchosin Community Mighty Garage Sale, because honestly there's a core group that just slaves away from morning until night basically on that for more than a week, and then with the sale and then the cleanup again. So they just really brought in a ton of money and did a lot of work and spent a lot of hours to bring in the funds to support the community house for the future.
Do you
So
know how much money they made?
I don't know the exact amount. I know it was more than 40,000. So it was a really productive. There's a lot of stuff left, of course, as usual, to clean up, but it certainly is worth it in the long run. Right, so in correspondence, we have the CREST annual report, and if you have a chance to have a look at it, it's quite interesting. It's they're a pretty amazing organization, really. I don't want to move on to other business. So what we have in other business is a paint on climbing tower that Mr. Donaldson was talking about earlier. There it is. I'm going to ask the fire chief to come up again and give us a little more information on this very exciting idea of a climbing tower.
Do you have to repeat my name again? Thanks to Brent Donaldson for giving you all the good details on it. He probably knows more about the tower than we do. It's a great opportunity. Saanich has offered this to us free of charge, and it's probably well worth $150,000 to $200,000 if we were to build it now. Like if we were to wait until we got the new fire hall in, that's what it would cost on top. We have all the drawings and everything that were given to us to make sure that it's all structurally sound. When we move it, the people who actually built the tower are the ones who are giving us a price to remove it, transport it over here, and put it back up. It fits quite nicely over there, tucks behind the school there. It goes with kind of what it's been started over there is all the agency and the responder training. There's a lot that we can do with it and continue to support our neighbors as well. One thing that we're missing here for a fire department is we don't have any kind of a host tower for training or a climbing tower for training. That means that we can't train how to go up a series of stairs and enter into buildings and do that sort of thing, which is what Soup needs and Colwood needs and Langford needs. We don't need that specifically here right now, hopefully never, but we do go for mutual aid calls. And by having that training, it makes us better trained to be able to go and help our neighbors. We've been looking into insurance and making sure that we cover all risks as far as it being open to public or other people getting onto it and getting hurt. So those things we're investigating. What the cost is for the pad, because we will have to put a new pad in the back there. It is painted green, so it's not terribly ugly from you can't see it. There's lots of trees in the background, so doesn't stick out too bad. So.
Any questions?
Yes, I do. So through you,
Yeah.
Councillor. Chief, so you expect that a lot of the training with the tower will be with other departments? Is that fair to say? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Councillor Donaldson?
So on following up with that, because and you have explained to me recently that we do share with training, like the extrication where we bring the recruits of other departments and they seem to go through a training regime together. So with this tower, I suspect it'll be integrated in that regard as well. So is it something that we will be able to benefit financially from?
No. I just, it's one more asset that we have here to do different kinds of training.
Mm-hmm.
We can now bring rope rescue training here. We can now do Aaron Fields, we want to bring him in from Seattle. He's a great instructor on a specific course that he has. But we need a structure like that to be able to do it. To build something like that back, you know, to say rent it out to our neighbors to come and train here, it's not really kind of a thing that you do, because you know we go out to their facilities too, and most departments already have a training tower of some kind. So if we started billing, they'd just go, well, we'll just use ours, right? You know, their own. So I don't see it being. I certainly wouldn't want to get it with the understanding that we were going to make money from it. If we made money from it, if we were able to bring on a whole bunch of new courses, and you know we were able to get some benefit that way, great. But I wouldn't want that to be the reason that we purchased it, or that we were able to get that.
Right, that wasn't really my intent. I guess my intent to the question is, when we do put on courses, are we benefit, I mean, other than the training that our own people are getting, but we invite other people to take those courses, and that money comes back in to pay for our services, and that is an asset.
Yes.
The insurance, etc.
Correct. Yes. From that standpoint, yes.
Okay.
Very little.
Councillor, did you want a resolution motion to this effect?
I do actually have one here,
Okay, go ahead.
unless anyone would like to.
Sorry, one more question through you, Councillor. So the cost of bringing and installing the tower is about $12,000 to $15,000. Not a big amount.
That's what I've been told. I haven't received the quote yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But relatively modest based on the asset that we're getting. But the question is where will that money come from? Is that a department budget that's allocated already, or
No. What I would like, what my recommendation or my thought is, our engine was deployed, our tender was deployed to a fire already this year, and we are expecting 12 to 15, possibly up to 20, for that deployment.
Okay.
So my request would be that we could earmark that money when it comes in for this project. Because we do not have that money in our fire department budget.
Councillor Gray?
So, thank you, Councillor. If I could direct a question to Ms. Czerniewski through you. How's that sound in terms of feasibility and moving the money around and that sort of thing? Is that?
Yeah, that's definitely feasible.
Oh, thank you.
All right then, I will make a recommendation to council or council support of the training tower project and direct the fire chief to proceed. Your seconder, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Okay, that is carried.
Councillor, can we go back to the CREST? I just had one question about the CREST.
Sure.
Yeah, so as Councillor Donaldson was asking the question, it's a great report from CREST in terms of their performance optimization of the network. Do you know how much we pay for CREST services in Metchosin?
Not offhand, but possibly Ms. Czerniewski would have that figure. Did have it at one time, but it's in the budget. Do you remember?
Maybe the finance.
Councillor Donaldson?
It's in the budget this year for $75,000
$75.
for the
Okay.
2023 budget.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we don't have anything else, so could I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor?
That's a quick meeting. Yeah. No, it's good.
So I'll call to order the meeting of the Environment and Natural Areas Committee on June 12th and at 7:25. And I want to acknowledge that we're on the territory of the Coast Salish people and our near neighbors, the Shannon people. This month is, of course, Indigenous History Month, and I was honored this past weekend to be invited to participate in the Changemakers Gathering Festival in Langford. It was put on as a collaborative event put on by the city, Indigenous communities, Indigenous knowledge keepers, nonprofits, sports teams. There was quite a crowd there, local business and community members. The event was designed to honor and celebrate Indigenous peoples and culture. I held down a booth with Peter Ord from the Habitat Acquisition Trust, and we were there to show our support in the district, Habitat Acquisition Trust and Pearson College for the Shannon First Nation and their decision-making around the Mary Hill lands. The festival was a safe place to learn, share and grow, and it was a real pleasure to be there. So we have on our agenda tonight a number of things I wanted to, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the pink correspondence from Bev Bacon.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Shukin. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So we're going to start this evening. Welcome back Steve Roddick from Pinna Sustainability. I hope everyone remembers Mr. Roddick, who's been here before working on the Metchosin Climate Action Plan. And this evening he's going to present the final plan. And we're looking for comments, corrections, ideas, anything that's missing, and adjustments that we might make between now and bringing it to council once any changes are made. May I hand it over to you, Steve?
Thank you very much, Councillor Gray. Tonight I'm going to keep it brief and do an overview of the process, a couple key parts of the structure of the plan, and the plan has been made available to council. I'm not sure if it's been made available online yet or what the process is from here, but we'll be speaking to some of these points here.
Yeah, it's been available for people to look at in the agenda package.
Great, okay. Hello everybody, I'm Steve Roddick with Pinna Sustainability, and I'll be speaking today about the District of Metchosin's Climate Action Plan.
Do public participation.
The project scope for this Climate Action Plan began with a focus on mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and was expanded to include adaptation, so thinking concretely about the climate risks that are relevant for Metchosin and preparing and responding to those risks. And then between those two, there are certain types of actions that fall into this area of low carbon resilience, where you're both reducing your emissions and you're mitigating some of the impacts of climate change. And as is phrased here, mitigation is largely avoiding the unmanageable, and adaptation framed as managing the unavoidable. In terms of our process, the basic steps were to begin with a review of regional policies, data, plans, information relevant to climate change planning. We developed a greenhouse gas emissions inventory based on CRD, the Capital Regional District's methodology, and preliminary mitigation actions. When we expanded the scope of the project, we went back and did some additional research and analysis of climate change impacts of concern and developed preliminary adaptation actions to prepare and respond to those based on both the preliminary mitigation actions and the adaptation actions based on a number of different sources of information and viewed through a number of different lenses, including feedback from the community, the science around climate change impacts in the region, what other best practices are emerging from other municipalities of comparable size. And using those, we began with this preliminary list and whittled it down to a few priority action areas. Outreach and engagement, as I mentioned, we reviewed and integrated feedback to refine these preliminary actions, and now we have this draft climate action plan presenting to you tonight. In terms of the engagement process, we had a council workshop back in September of 2022, a community survey in February and March of 2023, a second workshop with council in April of 2023, followed by a MIASC meeting that evening in which additional feedback was provided. And we're currently in the, we've had staff review the draft cap, and we are working now with council today to present this draft and talk about where we've landed. In terms of community greenhouse gas emissions, this is the breakdown of community emissions from Metchosin based on the Capital Regional District's methodology. As you can see, transportation is the biggest part of this, followed by buildings. There's also a large component that is sequestered emissions, which is a significant amount of emissions sequestered, but noting that's not included in the CRD's methodology. So this is, it's identified, but it's not counted. So it's not accounted for. We've taken that data and looked at a number of provincial policies, federal policies that are intended to reduce emissions over the coming decades, and projected these forward in terms of the impact of that provincial and federal senior government actions to identify what the gap is between the current emissions trajectory for Metchosin and what additional climate change actions might help to further reduce the emissions footprint to align with provincial targets and federal targets. And what we're proposing in this plan is a 2030 target of negative 40% from 2007 emissions levels and a carbon neutral target for 2050. These targets were pegged at these levels to align with the provincial targets, which was the precedent set in the previous OCP as well when the prior target was established. And also looking around at some local municipalities, some comparable municipalities, Colwood, Souk, Highlands, for example. Colwood has a 30% target by 2030, Souk 50% by 2030, Highlands carbon neutral by that date, and then the 2050 targets are carbon neutral for the province, net zero for Colwood, net zero for Souk, North Cowichan a bit further far is 80%. So just doing a bit of a look around to see what other municipalities around the area are doing. Moving on to actions and responding to both emissions and to the climate impacts of concern for the region. We identified 5 areas of action. There are many ways in which you can slice the pie of what types of actions you take and how you organize them, but we landed on these 5: land use, agriculture and waste, climate risk reduction, buildings, transportation, and community engagement. And within that, we have 10 goals. Well, I won't go through them all now, but each of them has a small number of priority goals to focus action. And then for each of these goals, we've identified a short list of priority actions. For each of these actions, we've tried to do an estimate of when this action could occur in terms of the time frame: short-term, medium-term, long-term. So is it the next 1 or 2 years, the next 3, 4, or the next 5 years? And a 5-year plan being a generally, it's a common length for a climate action plan. A lot can change in 5 years, so it's good to revisit it at that increment. In terms of the cost of some of the actions, we tried to make an estimate of, is it $0 to $5,000? Is it $5,000 to $15,000? In the $15,000 to $75,000 range, or over $75,000? And that's speaking with staff, trying to identify what's a large amount of money for Metchosin, what's a manageable amount of money. It's different for every municipality, but that's where we landed in trying to estimate how expensive some of these actions might be. And then also in terms of staff resources, looking at the full-time employee equivalent of how much effort it would take staff. 1 star being less than 10% of 1 FTE, 2 being 10 to 25%, 3 being 25 to 75%, and then 4 being 75 to 100% of at least one employee's job in a dedicated capacity. So through the plan, just to give a snapshot, I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is essentially the table where we've landed for each of these climate action areas. So this is looking at climate risk reduction. We have our 3 goals on the side, and we have 5 distinct priority actions. And for each of them, we've identified a timeline, estimated investment, and estimated staff resources. And it's important to note too that those estimates are rough. You know, the details will be determined as it's brought forward in the budgeting process and through the strategic planning process. And what that looks like for Metchosin in the particular context of how that would be implemented may evolve. And just to note, we have these priority actions identified, but also there were a number of additional actions that emerged that are some pretty good ideas that we wanted to make sure were captured. And we have an appendix that identifies for each of these action areas a number of additional opportunities for action. This is climate risk reduction, for example, and also land use, agriculture, and waste, a much broader category, also has a broader number of additional opportunities. So looking at implementation of the climate action plan, 5 action areas overall, 10 goals, 17 priority actions. We have these estimated timelines. Multiple priority actions are already underway. There's progress been made and plans to further advance some of those actions. And as I mentioned, the detailed resourcing will be determined on an annual basis through the budgeting process. It's proposed in this plan that it be a 5-year plan, so reviewed every 5 years, ongoing reassessment and iterative climate action planning. And this is something I tried to emphasize last time, but this is the beginning of a path towards climate action, and that path will evolve, and Metchosin's needs may evolve over time, and its capacity may evolve as well. But this sets us in a direction where there are concrete actions in place in order to progress this work. In terms of the evaluation process, moving forward, it's envisioned that the next iteration of the CAP will identify more specific metrics for evaluation for the goals. It's important to strike a balance between a municipality's or a district's capacity to do the evaluation and set up goals that are meaningful, and also that they're not so burdensome that staff are spending more time tracking the action than actually doing the actions. So this is intended to give some time to think through some of those goals and the metrics that could be used. So in terms of next steps, Council reviewing and confirming targets and priority actions were 2 things that I identified as wanting to make sure I got some feedback tonight, and also any other feedback on the plan. Obviously, we would very much welcome that, and any other comments we receive on that would be very much welcome. And then from there, updating and finalizing the climate action plan, and then it will come back to Council for adoption. So I'll leave it at that. Questions? Anything coming up for?
Steve, I think what we'll do is we have a little bit of a formality to go through some minutes, get them passed. Then we'll have some public participation because the public have looked at it, maybe get those thoughts, and then we'll jump in with council if that's okay.
Yes, excellent.
For everybody?
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. And thanks for all the work you've done with this, along with Catherine Position and Climate. We'll just jump back then to the agenda of public participation. Is there anyone who'd like to speak right now with the Environment Committee public participation? Thanks.
Bev Bacon, Metchosin resident, and you have my comments in a pink, and I'll give a copy to Penna because I imagine you haven't seen what I've got to say yet. Anyhow, I will go through this, what I've written, and then I have another new idea. So that I like a lot of what's in there. I like going back to CRD and saying, hey, you should give us credit for our carbon sequestration. What I would add to that is that we should have a special consideration that a lot of people don't think about is the carbon sequestration of our grassy fields. And what I've written in here is what I've learned, that our hayfields, our grassy fields, our grasslands actually count as high or higher than the trees because of, that's what they're saying in California, because the trees burn and release carbon into the air. And as far as the grass goes, the carbon is stored in the roots, so it's still sequestered. So there's two things: go after CRD to give us credit for that, and have grasslands acknowledged as good for carbon sequestration. I like the target of 40% reduction of greenhouse gas by 2030 and net zero by 2050, and I agree that this is predicated on having limited population growth and well-informed residents. And I think we can actually be more ambitious than that, and that's the idea that I'm going to give you last. Can't you just wait for that, eh? I support the actions to solicit external funding for new habitat protection and restoration projects. And we can't get Fire Chief Dunlop to do all our grant applications, so we should identify somebody that specializes in grant applications. And let's go for the federal money, the provincial money, the regional money, and find somebody who's brilliant at writing grant applications. I support leveraging land acquisition funding to purchase more land to be designated as protected areas, and we've got this aging population, and some of them are sitting on beautiful land, and we need to chat them up about their bequests and what they're leaving behind. And I think we should actively be seeking donations and bequests, and specifically for land acquisition, because the way Metchosin is in our OCP is Metchosin can all be chopped up in 5 and 10 acre lots. They don't provide for larger chunks of land. So if we want to keep our forests, largely they're private, and we have to be able to buy them when they become available. So we need to have a kitty for doing that. We need a war chest. And if we have any municipal property that's not high value for conservation, we should have that land sale ready, so that if we have an opportunity to acquire something, we can sell something that might be better suited as a residential property in order to get the chunk of forest that we need, or the chunk of wetland that we need. I like the idea of having renewable energy generation on the new fire hall, thinking solar panels and heat pumps. I'm sure that's being thought of. I'm making the assumption that there will be a new fire hall. I guess that's not a done deal yet. And I support the initiative to have and to enhance groundwater conservation by rainwater harvesting and efficient irrigation. And I think we could benefit from a seminar or a presentation on that topic. Maybe get Gord Baird to come. He knows a lot about that. But we could bring in some expertise and make it a little easier for people to do rainwater harvesting and efficient irrigation. I agree that we should look into belonging to the Canadian Federation of Municipalities in relation to the benefits of grants available. I read that we're not a member right now, but it could be advantageous because there's money.
Just punching our time.
Okay, a couple more. The writers give Metchosin credit for its tree management bylaw 287. In my opinion, we shouldn't have a lot of credit. It's not that great. We need to revise it. And the writers give Metchosin credit for its rainwater management bylaw 467. That needs to be revisited as well. It's not as good as it could be. Am I out of time now?
You're running tight. Why don't you come up with your big idea?
The big idea, okay. The big idea is, what do you know about zero carbon step code? I bet nothing, because I don't know anything about it either. But I copied something for you, and I know who knows about it, who would love to come and do a presentation for you. So I am part of Metchosin Climate Action Team, that's MCAT. And we come under the umbrella of SICAN, which is South Island Climate Action Network, and Jane Devonshire is head of that. And she would like to come and do a presentation on brand new, hot off the press, zero carbon code, which would Other districts are looking at that right now, and some are actively pursuing it, some are mulling it over. But be part of the team, and I know at least 3 out of 5 of you said you want to be climate champions. So I copied something for you to give you a little bit of information.
Thanks.
And I'm hoping you'll go for it, and maybe we can even be more ambitious in our targets.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thanks so much, Bev. Anyone else like to join in public participation? Okay, great. So we just got a couple of adoption of minutes. We've got minutes from Environment and Natural Areas Committee, May 8th, to look at. Would someone like to move adoption of those minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. So moved by Councillor Shoup and seconded by Councillor Eck. Any discussion? Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, on page 4, you have under reports, biodiversity resolution for the 2023 UBCM convention. Will you be presenting this in person this year at this convention?
I would hope to, but I guess we've got to get ourselves organized.
Okay, because I know the registration's like happening as we speak, sort of thing. So, okay, good to know.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. And then we have receipt of minutes from the Environmental Advisory Select Committee, NEASC, from May 24th.
Move receipt.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Shoup and seconded by Councillor Epp. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. So now we're back to the draft report, the District of Metchosin Climate Action Plan, heading towards the final report. And I wonder if anyone would like to start off with comments about that or ask questions. Steve's here to respond as needed. Yes, Councillor Shoup.
Councillor Gray, I do have a question or two for Steve, Mr. Roddick.
Perfect.
So, Steve or Mr. Roddick, could you talk about some of the methodology behind the land use emissions sequestration target you have, or sort of the figure you have, and some of the things that like what goes into that, and particularly do CRD parks, has that been built into our number?
Should I speak from the microphone?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shoup. In speaking with the CRD, my understanding is that the methodology for not accounting for, but calculating carbon sequestration is looking at satellite imagery, and then based on that, identifying roughly what the landmass is, what type of flora they're looking at, and then using a baseline figure for that type of flora to estimate, if it's grasslands, if it's forest, if it's a road, they can come up with a number based on that, just at a grid system. And that is one of the reasons that it's not accounted for, is it's a very rough methodology for doing that. My understanding is that that is the methodology that's applied through the CRD as well.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
And I could mention that I've raised this last week at the CRD Climate Action Task Force, and I think there's some interest in this right away. I mean, people are realizing that the question that we've struggled with, or we've talked about here, about do we want to leave Metchosin undeveloped? Answer yes. How do we get credit for what we've got here? And people are realizing at the CRD task force, sort of agreeable in the sense of, we need to recognize that in order to balance the question of what the land use is like out here if we're going to maintain those forests. So starting the discussion, let's see where it goes. But the same comments were made, by the way, Councillor Shoup, just about it's a rough measure, so I think that's why it hasn't been there before, but I don't know totally the story. I had a question, Stephen, that's, or maybe to council, but the 5 years. 5 years seems like a short time, but it seems like a very long time in the climate question, and whether we should review the plan sooner than that. Mayor Little.
Yeah, I have the same thoughts because it's not a long time. That our municipal cycles are 4 years, except for the climate's warming very rapidly, and it seems to be on a different trajectory than we had appreciated. So I think it would be wise of us to reduce that time.
Mm-hmm.
I have that written down here.
Maybe what we could do is mark it as a 5-year thing, but come back at this in 3 years or before we're done our term. Would that make sense, or would that please the council? Okay, let's do that.
You know, I was saying through the chair, I was just saying that I think it would be wise of us to, at the midpoint, to reassess this, make sure we're on track, see what's falling through the cracks, because things will inevitably fall through the cracks, and sort of reorient ourselves. And of course, with our strategic planning that we're going to happen at least yearly, twice this year, then we'll also reevaluate these, and so we'll get in the habit of keeping this in mind and through that lens making decisions.
Okay, that sounds great. Councillor Shukin.
So thanks, Councillor Gray. The thought that goes through my mind with this plan is that so much of it is going to be local action oriented in terms of making it real and live and useful in the community. So some of that is bound to change, I almost think, on a year-by-year basis. So for example, there is a movement in the community now to look at invasive species a little bit more aggressively, and thanks to your work, Councillor Gray, to kickstart that. And part of that work, though, is to encourage people to adopt areas where they can go back again and again to go after those invasive species. So things like that, where you're doing an educational campaign which may morph over time. So that kind of thing might find its way into something like our strategic plan that we come up and do on a yearly basis. The other part of the climate action plan, though, is the inventory, the carbon inventory, and I'd be curious to know what the time frame for assessing that is, because I think a lot of the data for that is drawn from the CRD, yeah, almost entirely. So, Steve, any understanding of when the next sort of data would be, wholesome data would be coming out of the CRD? Or?
I believe it's coming soon, but that's Steve. Perfect.
No, it's you.
All I have is I think it's coming soon, but I'm not sure the date.
My understanding, just based on the timing of the previous assessments, that it should be coming in the next 2 years. I'm not sure when though, because we were looking at, was it 2018, and then 2020 is the last one. So if that's I guess that's a 2-year time difference. But I'm actually not sure as to when they plan to do their next update. But I understand and agree that it's not something that makes sense for Metchosin to pursue on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get a solid number on that. Councillor.
Well, I guess the thing I found confusing was the Table 1 community energy use and greenhouse gas emissions provided. It said this figures were adapted from the CRD. The last one was 2018, so that's 5 years ago. And I actually don't really understand how the CRD would come up with these figures, and again how you would adapt them. I mean, just for example, like on-road transportation, like how can you possibly know how many vehicles are electric or gas operated or diesel or propane? Like I don't really I just wonder about how these figures actually, how valid they really are.
As mentioned, I have reached out to some folks at the CRD to ask about what their methodology is for some of these areas, because some questions came out of some of our previous workshops, and for example, they speak directly with Fortis and understand how much natural gas is sold in the area, and so it's going through the supply chain largely to understand how much fuel is coming into the area or how much vehicle ownership. CRD also does some surveys and additional information trying to understand transportation-related emissions from driving. But this is the kind of level of complexity that, it's a lot of capacity, And it's also not as fine-grained to feel satisfactory when we look at it, I think. So I think it's good to keep raising questions and try to understand where these figures are coming from and whether they make sense for a small jurisdiction like Metchosin.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I can see the, the initiatives are great. I just think the, how we can actually measure things is a little odd.
Mm-hmm. And it's evolving as well. They may update their inventory methodology in the next iteration, and the figures may change as well as a result of that. Mm-hmm.
I'll get some more information on that too. The group that I'm part of on behalf of the council has only met twice since I've been involved. And the first was an introduction meeting, and the last one was a bit more serious, but they're just starting off in terms of all the new councillors who've joined on.
Councillor Gray, just on Councillor Epps' comments about measurement, I would almost expect in some ways it would be a little more difficult in a way to measure a smaller community's footprint in a way. Because if you look at the big carbon, considerations that a local government would have, its transportation, its buildings, and its municipal services. And we don't do garbage collection here, like municipally anyways. Don't run a landfill. So yeah, there's some kind of weird almost gaps in terms of where you would go for data or how you would model the data. So yeah, it's a strange one, I think anyways, but observation. So.
Yeah, I think you're right, Councillor Shukin, and what's happened is they've settled on a methodology that'll keep changing and adjusting as things get better.
Yeah.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, so in order of priority, we mentioned the transportation, buildings, and then solid waste in those areas. And regarding transportation, some of the priority actions were to lobby upper level governments, including BC Transit, for more options to reduce cars on the road. But the second one, the EV chargers, actually that's probably an easy fix. We had talked last term about different partnerships. There's been a lot of talk, really no action. That's probably been about 3 years, 2.5 years that those have been sitting there. And really, maybe we should reassess that and go and talk to the two groups that now have that infrastructure on their property. One of them is our property. Ask them if they would turn it on and send us a bill, and that would be about 2 hours worth of work. And we could make immediate change now without a great amount of effort. The infrastructure's there. They're level 2 chargers, both of them. Maybe that's something we should do. That would be something that we could actually tangibly do.
Maybe I can respond to that. I think you're right about the lobbying the government, for example, in the Regional Transit Commission for the vehicle kilometers traveled distance, the targets of the province has put out there. The rapid bus and more complete lanes, so that can be dedicated lanes, transit on demand. Those are 3 ideas that have come forward through this process that we could be pushing for. On the EV chargers, our planner, Ms. Leishman, has been talking to the CRD, and there's been a big grant request gone forward, and they're very hopeful they'll receive it. And we have the funding for 2 chargers that would be coming to Metchosin as a result. But I'm planning to bring that back to council at our next meeting, next environment meeting. What isn't clear to me is exactly, well, did they get the grant, yes or no? And if they got it, then we'll have the funding provided through this big grant, I think through the federal government. The second option is for us to do, as you say, and just have a private company come in and put them in. But I thought if we get it funded through a grant, that would be the most advantageous, and it seems as far away as the fall was when the money would be available if it does come through. And I guess, not telling stories out of school, but they're quite hopeful. But I don't know the answer to the question. So it looks like that'll be here soon, or at least we can choose one or the other depending on our own finances. Come up. I had a different question, or maybe a comment. I want to thank Deb Bacon for her note here. And one of her last points is about extreme weather events and preparedness. And I had talked also to the CRD climate group just about the issue of, well, where is the dividing line between forest fires and climate change? Where do our climate plans go? And their suggestion was that we keep them separate. And I think that probably fits fire chief's here as well today. But the idea that there's responsibilities in the fire department and emergency services for emergency preparedness, disaster planning, and that sort of thing. And those efforts need to be keep rolling. And then our climate plan is about other forms of mitigation that we can do, and in fact encouraging and being appropriately supporting the work on the disaster planning, emergency planning side. But it's an interesting, just to say, it's an interesting division that we don't want to lose the disaster preparedness side of things, and it may in fact become more and more important as time goes on. But whether we call it a climate action or whether we call it being responsible in terms of our preparedness, I'm not sure. But that maybe is a discussion we can have as time goes on. I'm just highlighting it because it came up for me a few times, and it's in Ved's letter tonight. And then I guess I know the fire department's involved in at least the community wildfire, the resiliency plan, extreme weather assessment and response plan, and then so those things are part of, seems to be the climate change troubles that we're facing. There is a question also that was raised by Doug. It's also in the report that was prepared, and that's about the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. And I don't have a recommendation to it tonight, but I think it would be good for us to, and I'm happy to take it on, to research a little bit, what are the costs to do that, and what are the kind of grants that are available, and then come back to council with a question to say, well, should we make that move or not? I think there's lots probably in it in terms of other benefits, but there is a certain, they're managing a lot of the federal grants coming forward for climate, and so it may be the kind of thing where put a little bit of money in and there'll be a positive return, although that's not guaranteed. Mayor Little?
Yeah, I did contact them a couple of weeks ago, and it's about $1,200 a year. And it's not a lot of money to leverage a lot of OPMs, other people's money, and to get access to all of the grants that are coming out. I think would be well worth it, as well as the advocacy. I think it would be a great idea.
Super. I didn't realize that's not too bad a bill. Well, I'll prepare something on that and bring it back with a bit of information so we can reach a decision. Okay. Any other comments or considerations? Councillor Schutten?
Thank you. I have two specific edits, both interestingly occur on page 6. Just in terms of the title of this section, I might suggest it be retitled to Risk Reduction from the Impacts of Climate Change, as opposed to Climate Risk Reduction. Just says a little bit more. And in terms of very bottom, box 2.3a, which states investigate and report to council on opportunities to enhance groundwater conservation. I would also add protection, groundwater conservation and protection. And one of the realities of the aquifer that serves so many of us is it's volcanic rock, so it's very porous. It's been described as low productivity, highly vulnerable because it doesn't have that filtering layer of gold or whatever sand. So if there's a contaminant, there always is contaminants, of course, but it tends to go right through. So great. And
thank you.
Unless there are objections from the...
No, sounds great.
So.
Other thoughts or comments right now? Mayor Little?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the investigate the development of a waste gasification facility for the district. I'm wondering if that would be appropriate for Metchosin and where that came from, and if you could speak to that.
Sure.
This was an action item that had come up originally in some of our research into what some of the other municipalities were doing to address the issue of emissions from waste. I may be misremembering, but was it discussed at the MIASC meeting as well? Was this an action item that came up that evening?
I think it came up there, yes, as one idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's the origin of that, but it's not a small undertaking either. So which is why the action is framed as investigate what that would entail for Metchosin. Mm-hmm.
At the MIASC meeting, there was one participant in particular who was interested in this idea of paying attention to the technologies that are out there and that we should not miss the boat if something comes along that's useful. That's practical, maybe is a better word to say. So I think this fits in that category of things to keep our eyes on, and if it turns out to be something worth pursuing, great. If not, not so much. And I think your point about are we the right size is a good question. So some of the things in the report we can go on to and act, and others are more, well, let's check it out and come back and kind of look at, maybe it's a small example with the Canadian Federation of Municipalities membership. Let's check it out, see what's worth it, come back and do something, yes or no.
Yeah, because it sort of conflicts with our OCP. Our industrial is written, it's a very small component of our official community plan. It's about a half a page actually within the whole report. And so it would conflict with that. And I would just, I'd like to proceed cautiously with that one. I know there are many countries in Europe that do it, Denmark. And they use their facility as a ski slope in the winter. Actually, they're building. Saw it myself, and but I know that there's controversy here in the South Island regarding biosolids and gasification, that kind of thing. So I would want to proceed cautiously.
Yeah, I have a question mark beside it myself already, but the list at the end here is. We want to be, and I think Steve's done a good job being inclusive of many of the comments that we received, so we don't miss anything that was offered. Some of them may be quite attractive to us and others not so much, and it's really a question of not missing them or losing the thoughts as we move along. And maybe some of them will move into our actions right away. An example of that would be, again, Bev raised tonight the issue of the zero carbon step code, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in my councillor's report, where I've also heard about it recently and gotten interested in that as a possibility for us. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I just have one other question. Thank you for your report and your work, Steve. Regarding the metrics, how do they identify, do they not include the Salish Sea as a carbon sequestration source? Because we've got all this coastline. And one would think that that would also be a significant carbon sink, but I didn't see that anywhere in here.
That's an excellent question. My conversations with the CRD were largely around land and sequestration from land within the district. We didn't discuss what the Salish Sea and its relation to carbon sequestration or how it was or was not included in the inventory. It may be because of territorial boundaries. I'm not totally clear on the extent to which Metchosin's jurisdiction extends into the sea or in different places, or how the particular boundaries of particular places apply, but that's a question I could follow up with to get a better understanding.
Great. That seems like it for now. I want to say thanks so much, Steve, for working on this. We've got a few ideas here, and perhaps you and I can talk with Ms. Alicia and sort of finish up the work, and some of the commitments I've made too I can chase down, and we can work together on making sure we've got all that tied up.
Excellent.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. That's great. So the next item on the agenda really was my council's update, and in fact, the first one was Pinnock Consulting's work and Steve Roddick's work, and I'm glad that we've been through that together. And the second item really was that zero carbon step code. So maybe we've gotten a little bit of an information sheet here from Bev Bacon, which folks can take a look at. But when I went to that meeting I referenced a moment ago, the CRD climate group, I learned about this brand new initiative of the provincial government called the Zero Carbon Step Code. So what was going on is that the BC Energy Step Code, which is a different item, we last council meeting, I guess, we committed to get on that, and that was mandated by the province. So we were on to step 3 of that code. Step 4 and 5, I learned at that meeting, and my learnings are cursory, so that's why we've been asking staff about it to get a bit better, make sure we got our understanding clear. But what it sounds like is the investment that you make in step 4 and 5 gives you very little benefit in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. In other words, it's focused on the final parts of insulation and those sorts of things. And it's not, the zero carbon step code is the idea of moving to electrification, basically. Not natural gas, dropping that and going straight on to heat pumps, as opposed to gas and then something else. And so the province has said, look, if any jurisdiction would like to proceed in this way, that's the same move, I'm using the words electrification, move that direction instead of fossil fuel heating for new builds, you're welcome to do that sort of ASAP. Victoria and Saanich have both now committed to do that, and there's some interest that the South Island would do it all together. At least that's in the advocacy group side of things. But there seems to be some benefit on the builder's side too, because then everybody's kind of together now, okay, these are the new rules for working. So what I wanted to do was, and I mentioned at our last council meeting just when we were going through minutes, that I had asked at an earlier meeting when we went to step 3, could staff investigate step 4 and 5, you know, what's that look like, big benefit for us, yes or no? In the meantime, I found out about this new item on the scene, and so I just wanted to revise and ask staff to touch base with the CRD Climate Action Program, find out what's going on there and come back and give us an idea about the advisability of making a step forward. And then Bev's made give us an idea tonight that perhaps we could have a presentation by Jaden Devonshire to tell us a little bit from a public advocacy point of view. So 2 things there. One, so does that sound reasonable? Any questions about that? Mary Little.
Yeah, I like the idea of the zero carbon step code. I'm just wondering, practically speaking, when we have a number of residents heating with wood stoves and with propane, how would we handle that? Yeah,
well, the step code, the idea of the step code is for new builds. So this is different than the retrofitting side of things. And but to your point, people say, gee, what about, I want to do something different here. The fear of, well, wait a minute, we're going to have a power outage, what are we going to do? So I think most of these builds might well have, and this is what I'm not sure about, but you want to have a backup, either built-in generator or a wood stove, I expect. Something to give you auxiliary heat in the event of a difficult time. As many of us have at the moment. We have a wood stove, other people have generators and that sort of thing. Councillor Shukin.
Councillor Gray, thanks. You know, I wonder, I meant to ask this question of Mr. Roddick when he was here, and I wonder if I could do it right now. Mr. Roddick.
Go for it.
Is it still, is the burning of wood still considered carbon neutral? It long has been, and I it still is, but is there any change to that you're aware of?
I know it's a big discussion. From a carbon accountability, how it's accounted for, it's technically still carbon neutral, is my understanding. But I know that's an ongoing debate because it depends on many factors about where the wood comes from.
Yeah.
In particular.
And probably I don't know, the habitat destruction that might come from bringing a tree down.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess we can make this into a motion, but the Environment Committee asked staff to touch base with the CRD Climate Action Program and report back on advisability of adopting zero carbon step code in place of moving to step 4 and 5 with a DC Energy step code. Basically getting some more information. Would somebody like to move that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Shukin. And secondary, Councillor Epp. Any further discussion on that? Very much a learning point.
Yeah, I'm more interested I'm more interested in learning more about this. I don't know if I want to jump on it right away, but I think it would be really good if staff could bring back more information for us. Thank you.
Thank you. You're a little.
Yeah, I just did a perusal of the website, and in particular Central Saanich. They have I think it's called Hello Central Saanich BC Energy Step Code, working towards a climate leadership plan. And I thought maybe even in conjunction with staff reaching out to CRD, if you could reach out to your counterparts at Central Saanich, View Royal, North Saanich. They've all got, are at one stage 2 or 3 with the step code, and see where else they're heading. Not that I don't want to be a leader in this, but I'm just wondering what other people are thinking regarding the zero carbon step code.
Yeah, will do. I think that would be good to have an idea of the status of the different CRD districts. As I say, I think, in fact, I think Victoria went even, they had put it off for a year, and now they brought it up and are going to it in, I think, November. And I think some a date soon as well. So it's moving, and just knowing where everybody else would be quite useful to us. Just a sense of where it's at. Great. Okay, so did we vote on that? All in favor? Carried. And the other question was, would we like to have a presentation by Jane Devonshire from the Climate Action Network? Would people be open to that? Mm-hmm. About that? At a council meeting, or should we have it back at an environment committee meeting?
Back here.
Okay, we'll have it back here at the environment committee meeting. I'll offer an invitation out to Jane for that. So the next item I want to talk about is invasive species removal. And I guess I have a confession to make. I used to think that invasive species removal was kind of people's hobby. Various people I know were out doing it and getting together, and I think it perhaps has turned to a hobby, but it's also a social activity. But by gosh, it's such an important thing that's going on out there. And so, just in my report here, I wrote down that English ivy's been removed from the community hall a few weeks ago. The Metchosin Invasive Species Cooperative is working on Taylor Road on the property there, removing a big amount of holly. It'll be there for a stretch, I believe. Work continues to remove field bindweed from Morley's Meadow. The group there taking care of that. Black knapweed treatment. Today's Monday, I think it was happened today at Tower Point. The CRD is involved in that. In the park itself, so they're dabbing the plants, and then along with our public works doing the ditches. And then in the past week, Jenny Eastman and myself and my wife Janet, we delivered letters all around the area there to homeowners to give them the information about the knapweed. I'm happy to report that everybody that we saw, all the doors that we knocked on to give them the information about the knapweed and about the program, people were very positive. So it was a really, and lots of positive comments, by the way, about public works here in the district. So that was very nice. So this is June, and thank you very much, Councillor Donaldson, for getting this going on the Broom Bash. I guess that had been in advance for a number of years, and a big thanks to Gloria Lejour with Fire Smart at the fire department, and our fire chief, Stephanie Dunlop. We've got things going, and people are out there working on the broom right now. And anybody who's interested, the residents can contact FireSmart at metchosin.ca and for chipping and removal of neighborhood broom piles from now until June 30th. And then I think you mentioned Kathy Atherton, Councillor Donaldson, who's excited about Tansy Rainwort season coming up. May has been the province's invasive species month, and July is starting on July 1st is Metchosin's invasive species week. And so people may have seen the article in the last Metchosin News by Kathy Atherton, but she lays out just the idea that if you're seeing the plant, the flowers should be deadheaded, put in a bag and sent to landfill, and then the plants themselves can be pulled up and just left on the ground, but not in grazing areas, because I believe it's poisonous to the animals, particularly horses, and I think other animals, sheep maybe as well, livestock generally. And you can see those, for anyone who's interested, on the Metchosin district website under community and then environment and wildlife and then invasive species. So there's pictures there for everyone to look at to get the idea. There's also, in line with the broom removal, on June 19th from 5 to 6 p.m., Gloria Lejour from the FireSmart side of things at the fire department is holding a session, a workshop at the Habitat Acquisition Trust on Ed's Lane off Liberty Drive. And it's a workshop just about how to remove broom, what to do with it, sort of the technical side of it. That's 5 to 6 p.m. and everyone's invited to attend. So that's an invasive species. It's more than a hobby, it turns out. Councillor Johnson.
I have a question. So in the past when we've done Broom Bash, and I know this is definitely not the year to be doing it, but we've had people leave them on the side of the road and then Public Works would come and they would do a little burn or whatever. We're not doing any of that, of course, for obvious reasons. And cutting it and taking it to the municipal site here before it goes into seed. I understand that. So I was always like, oh, you never move it. So I've learned that this year. But one thing I haven't learned is when you take ivy down and you cut it off the trees, and you bring it here and you're going to chip it. I'm assuming that's what we're doing. Is that right? There's a difference with that plant because there's a lot of roots. So start chipping that. Are we going to have a lot of ivy growing out on the grass here, or how are we managing that? That's what I really want to know.
I don't think so. What's happened is that it's all being treated as an invasive species and brought to Harland, and so there's a special, basically goes into a dump there.
So it's not being chipped?
It's being chipped here and then brought there, as I understand it. Fire Chief Dunlop could comment.
Very valid point and concern. Some of the stuff doesn't actually get chipped. It's very hard to chip ivy, so it gets removed, and when they take all the chips away from the broom or whatever other debris is there, they remove all that as well. And then when it's fire season again, after October 31st, we'll do a good burn of that area. Right. So and further to the broom, we are actually, if you can coordinate it through your pods, we will come to your site and remove those piles as well. We're asking people to not stack it on the roadside. It has to be on private property and coordinated with the pod, and then we'll bring a chipper out there as part of the Fire Smart program to remove all of that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I saw a contractor the other day working on the pile, and I didn't see them separating. But anyway, a ton of stuff went into that chipper, and it's all cleaned up, and I came back later and it was all gone. I hadn't realized, but there you go.
So were you able to dig it out at the base of the fence?
Yeah, we pulled a lot out. There'll be some on the property of the landowner next door, but he's interested in the whole topic, and we made a big headway there.
Yeah, it looks great.
But it's the kind of thing you go back to, like so many other of these invasive species. Making headway, I guess.
Start.
Great. So the next item really was to tell folks we've got another report to comment on from Trans Mountain. So Trans Mountain, the pipeline company, is doing all of these, meeting the environmental assessment office requirements of the provincial government. So the latest one we got, or maybe it's the second latest, I have another one to tell you about, which is in my report here, provided before the meeting. But this one is for Environmental Assessment Office Condition 38, and it's about human health impacts. And so the fire chief and myself, we've looked at the summary document, but we have limited expertise to comment. Now it's kind of because we're a small place, of course, and we're getting these this is a massive report with zip files and all that. So the topics that are covered are things like bioaccumulation in country food. So the idea that it's getting into food that Indigenous people would traditionally eat. They're concerned about breathing in fumes, so respirology kind of problems, the toxicology of the products, and then even in fact mental health, psychology and psychiatry effects of big spills. So there's a lot there, and I'm not sure that, MEASC, the Environmental Advisory Committee, doesn't have the expertise to deal with this. We've raised it there and said nobody's got the background. But I wondered if people had other ideas. I mean, one way to respond is simply say this concerns us, and there's a few things there that I can certainly comment on. It's all kind of concerning, but it's hard to be, I'm not a toxicologist or have that kind of experience or health research person. But I wondered if anybody knew other people who might be involved or help us with that, or if we should just prepare kind of a response that's more or less saying, thank you for your report, we don't. Can't really follow up. So I was really wanted to bring it here before I prepared a response like that. Councillor Schuppen.
Yeah, I do have somebody who I might recommend to you, and I'll do that sort of privately and might check in with her first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody has an idea, July 24th is the due date, so there's a little bit of time. So I think I've signaled it here, but if anybody got a notion, I know when we were doing some other work, there's a comment that, we do have lots of people with expertise, so anybody knowing about that, that would be a help. The way that they did this was to have, or they created a report and now they're seeking response to their report. And the way they did it was to imagine a spill, I think in the middle of Burrard Inlet, and then the impacts on people around, people all around there and at certain distances. And so initially when you read it, it sounds like, well, it sounds like it's not too harmful, but then you get to the evacuation protocols and things, so it seems like, oh, maybe it is a bit of a problem. And I know we're concerned about that here in terms of spill response on our coast. Okay, well, if anybody comes up tonight, I'll follow up with Councillor Schuster, that'd be great, thank you. And then I'll either come back with a kind of a mild response or let people know that we're not in position or otherwise. While we're on the topic, we got another request from Trans Mountain for condition 39, and that's existing shoreline conditions report. And NEASC has begun to take a look at that. And what this report is about is the idea of they've picked, I think, 5 points, 4 or 5 points between Vancouver and here, Race Rocks. To fulfill the requirements, they want a complete study of sort of life and zoning and property ownership and a whole lot of different questions around these points, 500 meters on either side of a point. Now you might think, well, don't we want that information everywhere if there's going to be a spill? But for whatever reasons, it's designed in this way. It's just, we've just started looking at it. The report is due by June 19th, so we're not going to make it. We just got it, but we're not going to make it, and I was hoping that we might, if committee was favorable to this, I might just jump on it and send a letter seeking an extension. We've done that previously through council, Mayor Little, but our timing is kind of tight to get it to council, and it's just to seek an extension. Or I could ask for your help to do that, one or the other.
Yeah, sure. I haven't seen it, so
it's just this question.
It's the same. They're asking us to comment on that as well.
It's a big report with a whole lot of information. And when I've had the assistance, particularly of Gary Fletcher, Mary Hohen, and Andy McKinnon have all started looking at it, and it's just a big job to get it done. We're a few people and spending much time on it. But if that was okay, maybe you and I can coordinate and we'll get a letter out. Great. And then we would like to respond to it. It's just that one we're able to. It's just more of a time crunch. The other I wanted to let just in terms of an update, developing a shoreline spill response alongside the Shannon First Nation. I talked to Mary Little about this, but I did spoken to Chief Dunlop, who we're hoping would lead the exercise, and she's agreed to do so. And I had a word with Chief Chips, and he also said that's a great idea. This isn't something that will happen tomorrow. It's more one that's on the fire chief's list to get to, and we'd be working together with the Shannon Nation in terms of how we would respond in the first hours after a spill. So our fire department gets a notification. Even that question of getting notifications need to be sorted so that we're confident we would hear soon. And then as the chief says, fire chief says, we have that golden hour, when things are just starting to happen. And if we get a sense of where the oil is coming, we might be able to do something from the shore as compared to the people who are working on the ocean. So that'll be underway in time, and we can come back and report on that when more is happening there. Then I wanted to report on just some information I've been gathering about. In our strategic plan, we have the idea of developing watershed and aquifer protection strategies. And so I attended a meeting of a stormwater group with the CRD. And at that meeting, I learned that the CRD has a stormwater quality monitoring service. And I mentioned it when the CRD came and presented a few weeks ago. Metchosin is not part of it, and part of the reason we're not part of it is we don't have big storm drains, going into the ocean, which of course Victoria has, and Esquimalt and other places. But we do have Bilston Creek, and we have Beach Creek, and we've got quite a few smaller watersheds going into the ocean. Bilston Creek being the third largest in the CRD. At any rate, did get a price back for that. To join up would cost about $31,000 a year. for twice yearly testing of Bilston Creek and maybe another couple of watersheds, basic health parameters, 5-year testing for metals and other specific contaminants, source tracking of contaminants, spill response, that's if spill happens in the creek, as compared to the spills we were talking about a moment ago. And then they do some education, that sort of thing. So when I got the price, I think I'd mentioned again, Mayor Little, we mentioned it, and I said I have to get the price first. That I got the price. It's a bit of money for Metchosin. But in speaking to the same group at the CRD, they said, tell you what, we'll have a word with the Bilston Watershed Habitat Protection Association and may be able to work together with them. And they have these arrangements, I guess, with the Peninsula Stream Society and others, where they it's that whole, I guess, similar to invasive species. Volunteers take a big part of this kind of work, and CRD may well be able to support those. In addition, they are prepared to do testing high up in the watershed in Langford and at the bottom of the watershed at Woody's Lagoon. So I'll keep working on that, and I just wanted to let you know about that in the background in terms of an update. And then just another issue. Mary Little says the Aquatic Invasive Species Prevention Fund materials from the federal government, and me taking a look at that, and we're hoping to be able to put forward, we've got a variety of ideas, and we'll bring that to the committee and see what might make sense. We've talked everything from, gee, if I can remember now, bullfrogs was one, I think goldfish is another, we had some goldfish in some places in Metchosin, and then there were, oh golly, well, slipped my mind. There were 2 other ideas down down near Woody's Beach. So we'll come back to council with that, or to this committee with that when we get there. And the final item was just Marilyn Honan brought my attention to an article in the newspaper about Lyme disease being here, and I guess possibly they're getting worse. And just to let people know, summer's here again, so it's good to protect. And there's a link here, and you could put something on the website about that. District, just for everyone to know to be cautious. Lyme disease is a terrible, terrible problem if you end up having it. And if you do get a bite from a tick, it's important to remove the tick and then seek some medical attention. And you may get some treatment for preventing the advent of the disease itself.
Councillor Gray, I find you barely audible.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
And your voice trails off.
Oh, I'm backed away from my microphone. Oh,
did.
Patty, I apologize, and everyone else, excuse me, and those online, I apologize. I was just putting a plug in for being careful about being bit by ticks, and to be cautious at this time of year. Okay, so those were all of our items, and under reports, correspondence, we received the correspondence from Bev Bacon, which I answered a little bit, and I think we've responded to. And we have no other correspondence, bylaws, or other business, so I take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We've got it over here from Councillor Donaldson, turn the other way, and a second from Mayor Little. And all in favor? Great, carried. Thanks so much. I'll now turn off my microphone.
Was it on?
Apologies, it was. I'm sorry.
We're good? Thanks. Okay, I will call to order the community planning meeting of Monday, June the 12th. And are there any additions to the agenda committee? Hearing none?
The
Could I-
pink.
Oh, and the pink. Other than the pink, which we'll add to correspondence. Are there any other additions? And I don't see any hands. So could Mayor Little, a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor App, second. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so public participation, and one thing I will be keeping an eye on the time, folks, and generally we ask that comments be put in about 4 minutes. So is there anyone for public participation? Please come up to the microphone.
Good evening. My name is Bev Summers. I live at 519 Whitty Beach Road. I've lived in Metchosin for 38 years and have seen all the changes. Thank you to Mayor Little, Councillor Shipkin, Jeff Lehigh, who is General Manager of the CRD, and Andrew Freer, Senior Park Ranger of Regional Parks, for their prompt reply to my email sent June the 8th. I'm here today because my 6-year-old granddaughter carrying a butterfly net was charged repeatedly by a large unleashed dog by the water's edge on May 21st at Whitty's Beach. She was screaming, pushed into the water fully clothed and traumatized by this event. The owner was a distance away yelling, "He wants the stick." The dog did not return with the command. The dog finally retreated when the owner was at the scene. He never apologized or even came back and asked if she was okay. At this time, the signage at the entrance of the park reads, "For beach and picnic area, dogs not permitted June 1st to September 15th, except when leashed and passing through." This, to me, is an ambiguous signage. The CRD website says dogs can be unleashed walking through the park as long as they are in your sight and under control. Most dog owners will tell you their dog is under control. The present signage means that they can be off leash until they get to the picnic area and upper beach. Then they can be unleashed for I'm just going to repeat that. The present signage means that they can be off leash until they get to the picnic area and upper beach, leashed for 50 feet, and then their dogs go free. Why would people leash for 50 feet? Thousands of families and school children walk through the park to the beach on a narrow path in the summer months. Dog numbers have greatly increased since COVID. I fail to understand why dog owners have preference over small children and families. We have a very sensitive wild bird environment. The unleashed dogs are free to chase the birds. Between the increase in newts overtaking the right side of the beach, the unleashed dogs on the beach, I feel that this is not a family-friendly environment any longer. I would like to see a more simple signage that requires all dogs to be on leash while in the park. Most people will follow the signage if it is a simple and straightforward signage. I feel it is time for the CRD to be talking to the federal government about protecting the areas below the high tide mark. I hope me being here today will make a difference. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Summers. Committee, I made a little oversight. I did realize that Ms. Summers was going to be here to talk about this, and I think there's a deeper issue that we should take on as a committee, and I have a simple action request. So I'm wondering if I could actually add dogs in CRD parks under business arising on item 6. And I've got a few simple thoughts on some simple steps that we could take just to get a little bit more information. So any objections to doing that? Councillor Thompson?
I think we've had this discussion before about adding things later. Maybe it'd be better if we put it into your councillor's update. I don't know. Tina might be able to.
Ms. Hanson, any guidance for us?
I could suggest that you put it under other business since you also have applicants waiting for.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. Okay, let's do other business then. And now I believe that adding an agenda item after, sorry, Councillor Gray, go ahead.
I'll move to amend the agenda as
Second.
suggested.
Okay, thank you. And any discussion for me? Call the question, all in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, any more for public participation? Mr. Starr.
Thanks, Mike Starr, 449 William Head Road. I just want to voice my opposition to the increasing the operating hours or the liquor license hours for the Mile Zero. I live less than 100 meters away in direct sight. And it'll impinge. 11 o'clock is just too late, so I believe it'll impinge on my right to peaceful enjoyment of my property. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else for
I'm not sure if this is the right place.
it's your last opportunities tonight? Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. With regard to the Weirs Trail report, I looked it over today, and I want to thank everybody who worked so hard to pull it together. I know it's been a lot of work. I have two quibbles with the report. First of all, the traffic has decreased, the parking traffic and incidents have decreased, not since the pandemic was over, but since the trail was closed. That's, pardon me, this is regard to the Weirs Beach Trail. And secondly, I, along with most of my neighbors, was waiting to hear from the committee about the neighborhood meeting. Unless somebody had called me last night, I would not have known that this was up for debate again. And I guess what I want to say is that I think there's some question about the desirability of how public that access is. And my question for the council is, what is your global plan, your long-term plan for Weirs Beach? Because we have population increase all over the place, and they have not accounted for green places. And so they're coming out here because we have. And that beach, like Whitty's, well, less so Whitty's perhaps, but certainly it's a limited space. It has limited capacity, not just for parking, but also for people. And it's at maximum use in the summer now. It's not a problem in the winter, it is in the summer. And so I guess I would like you to consider the other issues aside from just the technical question of building a trail, but rather the other issues that follow from that. If you build a better mousetrap, they will come. And so when you fix that trail, and the neighborhood does need it, and we use it, but when you build that trail, we're going to get more people. It's that simple. And saying call the RCMP doesn't work. It took them an hour and a half when I made my call. They were up in Bear Mountain. And the other thing is that I would like us to consider other options. If I want to go to Bear Mountain now, I have to pay a $20 user fee. It seems as though homeowners associations have more power to govern their areas than municipal councils, and that's not fair. If we don't deal with this now, it's going to get worse. It's fixing the trail is not going to do it. So that's all I have to say about the trail. And thank you for all the work that's been done on it.
And your name, please?
Michelle Jones, 5290 William Road.
Thanks. Thanks, Ms. Jones. Anyone else for public participation?
Patty Whitehouse, Rocky Point Road. First to the comments about the horrible Whitty's Beach issue. Again, it's not the dogs, it's the irresponsible people. If the CRD adopted the principles that Council is prepared to adopt with respect to what under control means and enforced it, there would not be, or at least this kind of problem would be extremely rare. But what I was actually going to say tonight was I was down again on the poop patrol on Taylor Beach this Sunday and found several new burning several new fires had been there. I'm wondering whether maybe it's time to erect a very large sign that says beach fires cause impotence. Or something else that would get through to the irresponsible people that are violating our bylaws.
Go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Michael Morgan, Vision Way, owner of Miles Brewing. Chair, I have a handout here that may help with some of my comments. Am I able to provide it to council?
You can, sure. Clearly too big evening to be coordinated.
Okay.
All right, I will speak as quickly as possible and make this succinct. I apologize for not being able to be present at the last meeting. I was unfortunately out of the province traveling. I would like to provide some clarification and corrections to some of the information that's been provided. Most notably, I'll start with the staff report. In the most recent report, the hours that are listed for us that we currently have are Monday to Thursday, 2 to 9, Friday and Saturday, 11 to 9, and Sunday 11 to 8. That's actually incorrect. Our current hours are Monday through Thursday 2 to 8, Friday 2 to 9, Saturday is 11 till 9, and Sunday is 11 till 8. I also want to note that the staff report didn't include information about special permit hours, so I did provide some of that there. For special event permits, they are for an inside event 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. the following day, and if it's outdoors, it's 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. At the last meeting, Councillor Gray made a number of comments that I think should be clarified or corrected. He made statements regarding that after 2 consultations, the Liquor Board accepted the hours that were put forward by Council. Unfortunately, it's inaccurate and overly simplistic of the actual situation. What happened is after the initial consultation with the district, we made the decision to change our hours with Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. And we changed them to the hours that we had talked with Council on. So that is why those hours came about. Not that Liquor and Cannabis Regulation overruled our request. We changed our request as a show of good faith, acknowledging that we would seek an extension to hours if at a later time if we thought it was warranted and there was demand for it, which we now have. Second, it was stated that Mile Zero is a bar. It's not accurate. We're not a bar. Bars are typically licensed under liquor primary. We are not. We are under a liquor manufacturing license. Third, it was mentioned that Mile Zero Brewing is applying for the maximum allowable hours. That's false. Categorically false. Section 17.2.7 of the LCRB policy actually states that hours may be approved between 9 a.m. and 4 a.m. the following day. The hours we're requesting are 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., far under the maximum allowable hours. It was stated that stat hours was the one question that Liquor Board did not decide on. It's not entirely accurate. Liquor Board doesn't consider stat hours. They consider hours for the day of the week. So they consider a Monday to be a Monday. They leave it up to the business to determine their operating hours on stat holidays. It was stated that we are now a licensed facility instead of a manufacturer's license. That is false. We are entirely under a manufacturing license. While all facilities that have alcohol are licensed in one way or another, our licensing has not changed since our original application. And finally, it was stated that LCRB uses 500 meters for the consultation. That's actually not correct. Section 11.12.5 of the LCRB policy actually stipulates that residents within 0.8 of a kilometer or 800 meters are sought for public consultation. And that was actually what was placed on our 4-foot by 8-foot sign in front of our establishment during that. So quickly wrapping up to keep myself under the 4 minutes. It's unfortunate because it appears that we've been subject to a great deal of bias and discrimination, especially in regards to our most recent application here for this extension of hours, when really we're asking for hours that are still far under those available to every other licensed premises in the district. It's also my opinion that there may be a conflict of interest on council. As stated by my partner Michelle at the last planning meeting, and as indicated in the staff report, part of the reason we are seeking an extension of hours is to allow us to host special or private events, where an individual may request a later time than what's currently allowed under our license. So if someone says, I want to have a wedding reception here, can you have us here till 10? Councillor Gray is a trustee of the community hall, and the community hall does rent out for special events. If these events have alcohol sales, they would be subject to special event permits. Currently, the community hall can operate under special event permits that go later than the hours we are requesting. This would lead me to believe that there may be a conflict of interest, and compounding this is Councillor Gray's comments at the last planning meeting regarding whether hours that could be granted to Mile Zero Brewing under a special event permit could also be limited. It's my opinion that we may be subject to some discrimination and bias by members of council. If Councillor Gray is in a conflict of interest, then his extensive comments, some of which have needed correcting today, as well as his voting and putting forward motions at the last planning meeting on this subject, has furthered that possible bias and discrimination. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Beth Bacon, Metchosin resident. I have a bias. I don't want a liquor establishment there. I want them to manufacture their product, allow people to sample it, sell it, and have the people go home. And we have the right as landlords to say what will happen on our property. So that property belongs to me. It belongs to everybody in Metchosin. We have other tenants to consider. We have neighbors to consider. I find this person being very demanding, accusatory, and my bias is sample it, buy it, take it home. No special events, no staying open late. And I don't see it as competition with anything else because they started out just to be manufacturing a product. So they've gone a long way from where they started. And I don't think we have to go along with them. And we have the right as landlords to say, up with this, we will not play.
Thanks, Beth.
Mike Ballard, Metchosin resident. I don't believe they're asking for too much, because if you want to go to the cafe, you can go there and get scrambled eggs, a steak, and a beer first thing in the morning. So, just for perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And name and street number, please. Or street address, street name.
Sue Panton, 5129 Sandgate Road. Just briefly to comment about the Weirs Beach Trail. It is, I'm in favor. I think the report is comprehensive. I think there's been a collaboration and articulation of the needs of the residents and the larger community. One question for council is, Whitty's is CRD.
Yes.
What is Taylor and Weirs Beach?
Those are, well, of course, the shoreline is federal jurisdiction, but the access points and the beachfront itself is Metchosin managed land.
So I think that's important to take into consideration because, as somebody else has mentioned, the population has exploded out there. But not only that, it's such a finite little beach that to have the access points open for emergency purposes, Pearson College students who come down Pearson College Road, they're coming from all over the world, and that we can call it a bridle path, like the bridle path along Devonian. I completely disagree with parking there. In discussion with neighbors and witnessing it ourselves, parking and traffic down there, and in consultation with Chief Dunlop, who has done an incredible job mitigating accidents and yellow lines and whatnot to keep our community safe, but to keep it strictly as a pedestrian path and absolutely no parking. The other thing that council needs to be aware of is that the campground there over the last 2 summers has taken over the beach. So it's cut the beach in half again. So as you're walking the beach, you go down to one end, you literally can't walk, because people are putting structures, chairs, tents, boats, they bungee cord them to driftwood, and so the beach is now cut in half, which is everybody now using the, I don't know, whatever, the Sandgate end of the beach. It's just something for council to be aware of, is the usage. And then just finally is the dogs, because they're literally left to run wild. For shorebirds, for families, we often hear people yelling at each other, my dog's friendly. It's like, well, your dog is charging or walking over people's blankets or eating their food, and it's just a consideration for the multi-use of that beach.
Ms. Fenton, one question though. This is your observation of Weirs Beach, what you're seeing there?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And if we do have a problem, who do we call?
Well, us.
Well, no.
The
Sorry.
administration.
Not me,
No, not.
but the district office.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And I'll touch on some of those points when we get to the other business around dogs in terms of who to call and yeah. Yeah.
Hello, Adjourn, 5283 William Head Road. I'm one of the neighbors directly affected by the Weirs Beach trail. I believe the trail should be open. I've communicated that and tried to participate. The one thing I am understanding, that trail was closed for safety reasons. The recommendations for dealing with parking, I think, are wholly unsatisfactory and do not respect the safety concerns of my family, that of my child, the use of my driveway, that of my neighbors. I want it to be opened and returned to its proper state and made use for the neighbors, my neighbors, the participants of our community. Not everyone driving. I don't think it's a safe place whatsoever. Safe speeds or parking lot speeds, no one does it. Mayor, you and I have near misses twice in one visit with buses. Parking should not be allowed the way it's been recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further for public participation? Okay, thank you very much, and we'll move now into the rest of the agenda. Okay, so adoption of minutes, the community planning meeting of May 8th. Any comments, or can I have a motion to adopt?
Move adoption.
Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor of adoption? Great. And receipt of minutes. And this is for the Bufferland Working Group of May 9th. Any comments, or could I have a motion to receive these minutes?
Motion to receive.
Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Gray. Any discussion? Marilyn?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to the Bufferlands Working Group. This is a lot of work. I know it's taken a lot of work on behalf of both of you, Councillor Shukin and Donaldson, and the members of the group. So thanks very much for convening that and for your ongoing work.
Great, thanks very much. With no further comments, I'll call the question. All in favor of receipt? Thank you. And the Bufferland Working Group public input meeting of May 17th, and I'll just make a little comment, but can I have a motion to receive the minutes?
Motion to receive.
From Councillor Donaldson, second from Mayor Little. Just before the vote, that was a very good meeting. On the 17th, we had 25 people out, so we heard from a number of community members, certainly not all of the community who have an interest in the Bufferland. There are just a few key themes that we heard that night. So there was lots of support for rezoning the Bufferland away from commercial recreational as it stands right now, and some discussion about what a new zone could be other than just simply straight park. So that's something that the working group is going to look into. So I characterize it as a continued astonishment about the covenant allowing for the stormwater detention ponds, but we made it very clear that that covenant is in place. It is legally binding on both parties, and the covenant and easement is very much a two-way street, and I think work is underway right now to make sure that those streets flow effectively and smoothly. So there was not a lot of support given for the CRD's involvement in the future of the Bufferland. One or two voices, but not a lot of support overall. There was a sense that the fate of the Bufferland was important for all Metchosin, and not a great desire to open the lands up as a come one, come all park. So, and finally there was, I think, a universal view on the importance of finding out more about the developer's plans for the Central Mountain Estates. That is a critical aspect of the future of the Bufferland. There will be upwards of 312 homes that will be developed in the area just immediately adjacent to the Bufferland. And as we heard that night, they plan to build right up to the border of where Metchosin begins. So, and with that, without any further comments, if there are no further comments, call the question. And all in favor, receipt. Thank you. Okay, so nothing for business arising. Next we have the request for a development permit for 3667 Park Drive. And just excuse me one sec.
Councillor Shukin,
Please.
were you going to put the CRD dogs in CRD parks in business arising, or?
We'll do that in other business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Great. So just a brief recap of this issue. So a development permit was requested for 367 Park Drive, with the focus being the development of a single-story garage of about 807 square feet. So council did a site tour on June 6th, where we had a chance to talk with both the owner and their engineer. And a key question around this was stormwater management and the need to address the effective impervious area, which will involve the development of a swale-type water retention pit from the garage, and also the removal of a driveway to make that surface pervious as opposed to impervious. And of course, the reason for all this is that this particular residence is within the Shoreland Slopes development permit area, and the garage itself is within 60 meters of the shoreline. So there is a requirement for a development permit. We have on page 17 of the planning agenda 3 options, again, that are possibly before us. One is to grant the development permit. The second is to request more information from staff. And the third is to deny the application. So I'll throw just a reminder of those 3 options, but I was hoping to hear from the committee on their thoughts. Councillor?
Well, I was quite impressed with that both the homeowner and the engineer had really done due diligence as far as the property and what their plan is. They seem to have everything covered and be actually under a lot of the requirements that we are better than the requirements that we actually have. So I think I would like to move option 1 to issue development permit 22-02, permit construction of a 1-story 75 square meter garage at 3667 Park Drive. No, Ms. Hanson, do you need me to read out all of it?
No, we don't have to
Okay.
read it out.
Thank you.
Just option 1.
Okay. So Councillor Epp has made a motion for option 1. That's second. And any discussion? Marilyn?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Epp. I'd also like to thank the applicant for applying for this DP permit before he began work. It was also really great to hear from their engineer from Rysick. And so we all asked a number of different questions, and that just shows the beauty of having site visits. As we're reminded by residents, we really need to see these sites, and that was beneficial for me. So I will be voting in favor of the motion.
Great. Thanks very much. Councillor Johns?
Yeah, I would agree as well. It was very comprehensive. It was great to be able to actually envision right before us where the water would go. And they're certainly taking into consideration not taking down as many trees. They first originally had proposed to us removing the pavement that's there, and being very cognizant of what may or may not happen with that shoreline. So considering that there are some other developments that have been going on in the neighborhood, which they were aware of as well, they wanted to make sure that they cross their T's and dot their I's, so they're very careful of the environment and where it's going to affect their neighbors as well as themselves.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Gray?
Yeah, I'll echo those comments. Just to say, just a caution for staff, the draft development permit 2202 at page 21 says the removal of 4 trees at item 3. It's corrected at item 4 where it says 2 trees, but I think what we're agreeing to tonight under option 1 is 2 trees be removed. I think that's really the one part of all of this that we're ending up doing, is saying that everything else looks really good in terms of our requirements. It's just the loss of these 2 trees, but let's make it 2, not 4.
Yeah. Okay, great point. And yeah, again, just to flag that, option 1 does say the removal of 2 trees, which we learned that case. So any further comments on this development permit? So with that, I will call the question. All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you very much. Okay. So we next get to item 7B, which is the additional information and the request to amend hours of the existing liquor license around Mile Zero Brewery. Now, before I begin this, Councillor Gray, did you want to address the comments that Mr. Morgan made around conflict of interest potential?
I'd love to address them, but I think that first, if you could give me a moment, I'd like to have a word with our CAO just about the circumstance I find myself in. I would have a wholesome response to this, but
okay,
if
so
I could have a moment.
Do you want to step away from the table and
yeah, just for a moment?
We can is it?
Say, I would suggest you do recess for 5
Okay,
minutes.
great. So we'll recess for a few minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
I'm getting stiff.
So my recommendation committee, it would be to postpone this discussion so that we can confirm the existence or non-existence of conflict of interest, given the fact that it was brought up at tonight's meeting, and obviously we're not able to confirm that at this moment. So that would be my suggestion, to postpone the discussion.
Okay, great. I'm in favor of doing that. Now, I think we need a motion to postpone.
Yes.
Okay. Can I?
And should I be involved in the motion to postpone?
Could I have a motion to postpone? Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Mayor Little. And any discussion?
So, so we're not going to discuss the issue at all, and because unfortunately people have come here for this specific reason, so I would suggest that when it's on an agenda future, that we make extra effort to reach out to the community to inform them that this will be reread or readdressed.
Okay. Councillor.
And I would also like to make sure that that when it comes up next time, the report, that a lot of this information that is possibly not correct, that the report would make sure that all the correct information is included in the next report.
Okay. Okay. Let's. Great. Good point. Maybe we'll deal with that separately if we can. We'll deal with the postponement. But Councillor Craig.
Yeah, I'll just offer that I'll seek legal advice between now and the next planning committee, so we can set up now in terms of giving full notice to everybody that I'll have that and know what I'm doing in the next planning committee meeting. And it's already in the schedule, so that'll work, I think.
Okay. Sounds good. Any further comments? Okay, so I'll call the question on postponing this item. Okay, all in favor? I just back to Councillor App's comments.
I was just going to also make a comment that if we can request that any submissions do not be made to council members during the meetings that we've just previously discussed, because it gives staff, we do not have the opportunity, same with council members, to either absorb the information right at that moment, or same likewise for staff as well.
Okay. I wonder if I could recommend to Mr. Morgan, who presented this information, that he submit it to the planner.
Yes.
And then that be factored into the next report, and I think that's how we could do that. So, Mr. Morgan, is that okay?
The handout provided to...
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, I can email that to the planner.
Great. Okay. Okay.
So with respect, I'm not sure if the planner can comment on points that were made by Councillor Gray.
Exactly.
I'm wondering if, how are we going to do this? So if you do not declare conflict of interest, you'll have these comments here, these questions and comments that you'll be able to reply to.
I'll answer to each one of them.
Right, and then if you do declare a conflict of interest, I guess we'll have to take this under advisement in our deliberations regarding.
Yeah. Okay.
But certainly the planner can talk about the information about the permit hours and the liquor license hours as listed.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Carlo. So, Councillor Gray, anything?
That works well.
Okay.
I think some of them are factual errors in the documents we received, so they just need to be corrected.
Correct.
And others are a question of colloquialisms or whatever, so it's all good.
Okay. Okay. Great. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is the request for development variance permit for 1585 Zenita Drive. Zenita Heights. Okay. Okay. So the issue here is staff have asked us to approve notification of the residents living within 60 meters of the property that is the subject of the development variance permit, or the DVP. And the key variance we're looking at here is that the landowners have requested the setback from the principal residence to be 46.3 meters versus the 15 meters that is part of the secondary suite regulation. within the land use bylaw. So the property is zoned uplands, and so it's just under 10 hectares in size. The rationale for the variance in the setback is the challenging topography around the main residence, the desire to minimize impact to native vegetation in that area, and that the proposed house or secondary suite site can use the existing driveway. Now, I'd be curious and interested to hear the committee's views on this, and as we've done in the past, I would like to, unless we are on side with denying the application or recommending that council deny the application, I would suggest that we begin notification of the nearby neighbors and then arrange a site visit so we can see this in person. So, but committee, your thoughts? Councillor Johnson.
Yes, so when I'm looking at this and considering the original deliberations of how we came to have detached suites and attached suites, and the purposes of those. And with the detached suites, they were to be within 15 meters of the house, the door facing the principal residence, up to 15 meters or as close as 1 meter. And the purpose of that is, one, there was a real fear in the community, and I believe it still does exist, that we don't have two houses, not talking about suites, but two separate houses on a property. Now that this is an uplands zoning as well, the other concerns with upland zoning, of course, is wells and septic. And in this particular application, they're asking for a completely separate septic field as well. I think a site visit's definitely warranted. We've got some photos here, they're not that legible, but as we found with other site visits, seeing is a better comprehension of what's actually there. So even though this is like triple the distance of where we would normally recommend, I'd like to actually see what this actually looks like. How close, or is it visible, or what is the lay of it? The proponent actually has only been on this property just a few years. So they bought the facility, the property, knowing what they had right there before them, for their family.
Well said. Anyone else? Councillor?
Well, I agree with you, like have a site visit, because I think your plan is sound.
If there are no further comments, I'm wondering if I could ask one of the committee members to move option 1 with the addition that we have staff look at site visit with the property owners.
So moved.
Councillor Epp has made the motion to support option 1 with the addition of the site visit. Seconded, please. Mayor Little, thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Gray.
I'd just like to echo Councillor Donaldson's comments that, so when I look at it too, I get the feeling that, well, wait a minute, it seems so obvious when I read the documents that there can't be a secondary house or detached suite close to the house as it would be required. So it almost feels like a buyer beware situation. The property maybe isn't appropriate for a secondary house, certainly under the existing rules. So that's the part that has me a little bit uncertain, but I think going and seeing the place might be a big help in that regard. Just to understand so on one hand it's like, well, it's a no-go, so what's the rationale here, and let's take a look at the place and see what's what.
Very much. Marilyn.
I understand your concerns, and there are many secondary suites that have been built without our approval, without the requirements. Saying that, I'm not saying it's right, but I do want to remind Council that we are also in a housing crisis, and we want to also show the province that we are considering housing options. within our area, within our OCP, and so I think we have to be cautious what we say and how we vote. Over the last 4 years, we gave out variances almost 100%. I think it was 100% of the time for lots of different reasons, for outcrops, croppy parts, for topography, for trees, for lots of different reasons. So I think the site visit will be very informative for us. Okay.
Councillor Gray.
Through the chair, if I may thank the mayor, exactly, and keeping an open mind is key. And that's why I'd like to go and hear a little bit more from the proponents.
Great. Yeah, personally, I find this one quite challenging in terms of the distance being 3 times greater than the required setback, the regulated setback. So, yeah, site visit would be good to undertake. So, okay. Any further comments? Okay, so the motion to support option 1, I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Great. So we next move to the councillor's update, and there's only one item on the councillor's update, which is the report. Where's each? And I'll just get there. Okay, so just a quick recap. So again, the trail was closed on the advice and by way of a council resolution on October 3rd of 2022. So it was one of the last actions that the previous council took. And then this came back to the planning committee on January 16th of this year. And at that meeting, we referred the issue back to the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee. A subcommittee was formed from PTAS to look at the trail and what were the options for the trail itself and also for parking and traffic management. And so what was interesting is that the folks from PTAS were pretty clear with me that they didn't feel that they had expertise in terms of parking and traffic management. So I undertook that on my own and had meetings and a site visit with both the fire chief, who's been there as an enforcement person in terms of parking, and also our public works lead to talk about some of the actions that could actually be possibly put in place to physically prevent parking, especially in the no parking zones, which apparently have been used in the past. So the recommendations themselves were developed after I had a chance to meet with the adjacent landowners. I think we did 3 site visits with PTAS representatives, one of which involved a visit with the engineer as well. So we had a really great first site visit. Mr. Hanan was there along with the other site visit, the other owner, and we talked about a number of options: rerouting the trail alignment, possibly removing the berm, the possibility of anchoring more substantive stairs to the beach. And what generally we came to in sum was that the best option is to return to a naturally formed trail that had the benefit of some more engineering expertise so we could make a stronger, more resilient trail, but essentially keep it in the condition it is now, which is a natural trail. And quite frankly, there will still be some risk in terms of stepping down. It is a steep area, and that is the reality. One of the things that we tried to look at was removing the hump, but as I mentioned in the report, that would have involved the removal of at least 2, but maybe 3 mature trees. So, and of course, there's some risk too when you dig into an area and you don't know what's below. So, again, so the recommendation is to return to a natural trail, and in terms of the work that needs to be done, there's 4 elements here. The natural trail concept, that we try and keep the work within $15,000, and that the work plan that is developed by staff consider labor from contractors, public works, PTAS, and other sources, potentially folks from the William Head Institution. There is a question about an encroachment issue on one of the neighbors' properties, and that has to be addressed as well. So, and also that remediation work begin as soon as possible. So, sorry, one of the other aspects of this is we looked at the trail. I think all of us recognize, the more we talk, especially to the neighbors, we do recognize that there is an issue on the beaches, and Ms. Jones raised that very articulately. But in terms of the issues that we could grapple with in terms of the assignment given to us by the committee and council, we just couldn't look at the beach issues at this moment. I think that this is something that we should dig a little further into in terms of enforcement on the beach. And interestingly, we talked about dogs tonight, and we're going to return to that very shortly here. But that's not an issue that we felt that we could grapple with adequately on this particular question. So my request is that the committee pass a motion supporting the recommendations in terms of reopening and rehabilitating the Weir Beach Trail. So sort of further ado, I'll turn it over to comments from the committee.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate the amount of time and energy that yourself and the residents and staff have put into this. I'm quite familiar with this trail, and I like the fact that it's a neighborhood trail. And what you're proposing here makes sense, not to encroach any further on the neighbors on either side of that trail. Try to get it back to its natural state the best as possible, that it is safe, and it might mean that, like the Whitty Beach stairs, that we have to monitor that year to year to see depends what you're going to uncover there. I'm assuming we're going to talk about the parking thing separately?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I have comments about that.
Great. Any further comments? If not, could I ask for a motion to support the recommendations as outlined in the councillor's update regarding the trail?
So moved.
Councillor Donaldson moved that motion. Seconder, Mayor Little. And discussion on the motion before us. Mayor Little.
Yeah, I think this is a great plan. Your comments regarding other sources, in particular neighbors. We do have one of the neighbors with significant engineering. Well, he's an engineer, but he's got significant experience in aquatic environments. And that was very gracious of him to offer his support of that and support of a public trail. And then also we know that we've used William Head Institution in the past, the work crews for many projects, and that's a great suggestion as well. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor.
Excuse me, Councillor Donaldson through the chair. I just remembered how much for this type of remediation did we budget for? I think it was more than this, wasn't it?
You could look it up. I brought the budget.
If you don't know offhand, that's fine.
No, it was in the vault. This vault.
It's near that. Yeah. Okay,
So,
thank you.
if I can answer that, so we put aside $50,000 for trail work this year, which would include this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
thanks.
Yeah. Great. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I'll support the motion. I think this is a nice solution to the problem that we were facing. And I like the price point better than the alternative that we had been looking at earlier at, I think, $55,000. So this is a much nicer thing. And I like the idea that it'll be a natural trail. I think that suits the area nicely. And we heard from a few residents here too, but they're concerned about a lot of traffic there, traffic on the trail, I think. But as you point out, it won't be, it's a steep trail, but we're replacing what was there before, and I think it served well for many years. So, I like what you've done. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks to the group who've been working on it.
And based on the discussion with the engineer, I believe that we will be able to do a much more robust trail in terms both of durability over the years and safety as well. So, okay. So further comments? Hearing none, I will call the question. All in favor of the motion? Great, that passed. Okay. So parking and traffic management was also given to the committee and as part of this task. And it's interesting, in the site visits that I made to the trail, I quickly came to understand that this is probably one of the most dangerous areas in terms of traffic safety in Metchosin. And it just doesn't take you very long to understand that. What I'm to understand is that over the years, things have become better, and they've become better because of active enforcement by the district of Metchosin. Now, are they perfect? Apparently not, no. And I totally sympathize with the neighbors who live in the area, and they've taken steps to protect their properties and on the adjacent side. But I recognize it is not always going to be enough. What I'm to understand, though, is that those neighbors do have the phone number of the fire chief. And so if there is a problem that appears, they can put in a quick call. And with that, we've also heard in the last few weeks that the fire chief is aware that summertime is here and that patrols need to be stepped up in terms of enforcing the no parking zones. So what I've suggested with the recommendation here is that, there is one area that is really bright for parking, but it seems to have been led to haphazard parking that basically almost runs itself into the neighbor's fence and into their yard. So in speaking with the Public Works lead, we thought that we could have barriers put up there, simple barriers to prevent parking, which would also free up the transit zone as well. And again, that there are no parking signs, and these need to continue to be enforced. And the RCMP be notified that this is an area of concern. Well, it's not so much that the RCMP come and respond to incidents, but they should be able to step up patrols. We've heard that from Superintendent Preston, that if we can identify certain areas, they will have a presence there. So again, that is part of the recommendation. And then when we know that the time is right for additional parking in these areas, that we step up enforcement, and we even take steps potentially with pylons or something to ensure that there is no parking in the no parking zones. Okay, great. Those four elements are part of my recommendation. And again, as we go along, if there's new ideas that will allow us to manage the situation there more effectively, I think we should be open to. So, any comments on this part? Mayor Lynn?
Yeah, this is really a problem area, and I was out there several times, and there was one time when there was a really near miss. Somebody could have been killed right while we were watching, because there was a bus barreling over the hill, and people there. So I'm in favor of having no parking signs in areas as such. I would like to have the other signs put up that a minimum of 2-hour stay. Because the unintended consequences of providing parking there is that people are coming early in the morning with their families and their toys and their picnics, and they're staying for 8 or 9 hours. And then they must have very large bladders, because there's no latrines or loos down there. And what has happened is that the neighbors are having people use their lawns as facilities as well. The neighbor, there was a pail just when we arrived. The neighbor had gone and done surveillance and picked up another pail load of garbage and loos or doggy poop bags. And so I think that having a limit on the stay in those 3 parking spots that are across the road from the trail would really help. A 2-hour limit or a 3-hour limit, I think, would be, and then we would enforce it. And I think across the road there is room for 3 cars, but often people do 4 and 5. So I think we need to put up barriers as well. Along there, because it depends what we want to do. I think this should be a community trail, and people can go there with a limited time. so it's accessible to people that don't live in the area, but they should have equal opportunity. So I think the limit on the parking, and we would of course have to enforce it, I think would be sensible.
Okay. Councillor.
This really brings up quite a large issue that's looming and getting bigger every year, especially this time of year, and that is enforcement. Because right now, we just basically on weekends, we're asking the chief to basically volunteer her time to be out there enforcing, people lighting beach fires and people parking and where they're not supposed to park and things like that. And this is, we're asking for more and more enforcement, and people are asking for it. And I think council really needs to take a hard look at how we're going to staff this enforcement when it's apart from regular hours.
Great, thanks. That's a great point. After this motion is dealt with, I wanted to talk about some of the other issues connected with this. We're talking about dogs, but there's also on Weirs Beach, there's the use of the beach by other residents who are, we've heard the story about chaining toys and craft and whatnot. So it's basically the beach is becoming a proprietary area for seemingly certain people. I think that is another topic. I'd like to see if we can get into that. And Mayor Little, I don't know if I totally support the minimum 2-hour stay signs, because in some ways I don't know what that does. I think it might actually just cycle more people through the beach. But I actually, the other thing is I think it may be part of that bigger question as to how to manage the beaches, both in terms of dogs, garbage, bathrooms. So I'm wondering if we might be able to take that up separately. What I might suggest in terms of the parking and traffic management, that we look at additional options for signs as well, and add that as a sort of a fifth element to the parking management things. And that could include the time stay, or the limited time stay. So, good, okay. Councillor Gray.
I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this. I was wondering, and I don't have any background information to suggest, but are we going to have people not just parking up the road a ways, so closer to the institution, William Head, and then walking the way down, and will that be dangerous then? So maybe there's more to talk about the initiatives you've got here, but then observing and watching and seeing what happens next, because there may be some, knock-on effect, unintended consequence, let's say, from what we do here. So I'm going to suggest that we do what you've suggested, or recommended, excuse me, and then keep an eye, and maybe bring it back at this particular point, just have an update on how's it going. The other thing I wondered about was in terms of enforcement, different kind of enforcement. I heard, not tonight, but a previous night, and I don't know the veracity of this, but that there's certain times shift change at the prison where there's a lot of action. So isn't that a time when it wouldn't be the fire chief involved in that, that would be the RCMP? Or having a word with the leadership at the prison to say, hey, we've got this big problem here. Maybe there could be a staff meeting and people could sit down and talk about it and figure out a way to cool things off. I think it's worth a try anyway. It's not a huge ask to say drive at the speed limit and be careful in this particular corner, and it might be amenable to that kind of fix. Now maybe there needs to be a regular staff meeting once every 6 months or something, but I think it's worth an effort. And then if buses are barreling along, well then that's a word of BC Transit, so maybe a word of the Commission, Mayor Little.
Now, what I've heard about the shift changes at the prison is the times are pretty regular. Mm-hmm. So you could set up patrols there if need be at that time. Councillor.
I mentioned that several times to the RCMP. Okay. So I don't know if they ever actually go there or not, but it might be they don't go. Well, I guess they need reminding then.
Okay. Mary Lou?
I have brought this up with the warden at the William Head prison, but I'll remind him again to remind his staff. But that still doesn't address the issue of the parking. And so the buses, it's not at shift change, the buses run regularly there. And people seem to just really go fast on that curve. And more likely, Councillor Gray, is people will probably park up College Drive as opposed to going up William Head Road. And I'd almost wish they would, because then it would give them a pause so that when they cross the road. What is happening now is that cars are parked on the road, kids are jumping out of the car into the traffic. It's really horrific. And there will be an accident there if we don't do something. It is just, and I've seen pictures of people walking across the road with a canoe on their head. And do you think, my goodness, with a canoe on their head, seriously? And other kids out on the road without their parents. Their parents are packing the car and they're out on the road. So that the traffic issues, mitigating the speeds or slowing the speeds will not mitigate what the real problem is, and it's parking there. I'd rather them park up the drive, up College Drive, as opposed to right on William Head Road.
And as I understand it, right now there are 3 or 4 parking spots up Pearson College Drive that can be accessed. One of the things that I asked our Public Works lead is whether it was possible to put barriers up the hill as you head toward where it flattens out toward the prison. And his view was that would be really problematic. And what the barriers, I would hope, would do is that you just physically do not have a place to park there at all. He raised some safety issues, but also issues with snow clearing and even just maintaining the barriers, because the shoulder isn't actually that wide before it actually hits a ditch, as I recall it now. So we did look at the possibility of actually really creating obstacles to any cars being in that area. So again, deemed not safe, not optimal. So, sorry, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I just want to offer, I was talking a multi-pronged approach. So let's go to the speeders, we can speak to them, and talking to the warden's a great idea, Mayor Little. Talking to the commission, to the bus people, their employees, so they'll be receptive to would feel certain. There's the parking issue. Is there any sense, Councillor Shukin, having saying parking is over there on whatever street it is?
College Drive.
You put a sign saying parking is available up that other way.
Yeah.
So let's not lose sight of any of the ideas, but why don't we build and see what's working, and maybe nothing will work, but at least try to get this in line.
Yeah. Great.
Yes, the days that I've been there, I've seen them all park right on the bus stop side where the neighbors are, right where the trail is. It's absolutely mayhem stopping the bus. I don't know where people are going to go. I didn't look close enough to the other side, actually, because there weren't cars on that side. So I don't know. Is that a no parking zone in that whole neighborhood? I know that people don't read no parking signs. We see it in this corridor. We see it on market day. But I have to say, what does work is the pylons. So we've been setting them out the last couple of Sundays. And I don't know, it's just something about those orange things. And they're pretty inexpensive, but people they see them, they're alert. But a no parking sign, they're ignored.
Exactly.
It's happened on garage sale day. It's happened. We've had Merrymaker Market. It's happened here on the grounds with the farmers market. People really are not reading. They're not interested in reading. And I really sympathize with the neighbors in that neighborhood. I mean, the bus stop's one thing, but that was a neighborhood trail. You just walk from the Ron Weir Trail or from whatever neighborhoods around there. And unfortunately, COVID has brought a lot of people out here. It's a great place to visit and recreate. But I'm just wondering if maybe in that corridor, with the way the road is designed and the neighbors, the issues they've been dealing with, that it is a no zone for parking, just the bus. I hate to say it, we're going to push it on to another neighborhood, but I think if we go with a no parking in that area right now, And I understand the 2 hour thing. The concern I have with that is then the person that's enforcing has to go back out every 2 hours and chop those tires or whatever. And I'm equally concerned that it's our fire people, they're the people that are, could do it. It's that when there's another call, hopefully they're going to that first and not being drawn so far away from our, well, hopefully in the truck. But once the apparatus is out there, we've got an emergency on this side because people have been negligent because they're not reading no parking. I have a problem with that. So I'm concerned about our emergency personnel being drawn out to frivolous ignorance of not reading a sign and then disrupting a neighborhood.
Okay. Great points. And the element here about putting up the barrier on the north edge of the trail, that's exactly where the bus stop is.
Okay.
How far we can go, we'll push it, I think. But we have to leave room for the bus, of course. And yeah, but
Okay.
based on what I've heard, it matches up your what you heard as well, is that parking is very haphazard in that area. So, okay, so I have to, Chief. Yeah, please. Okay.
I think you all have some really great comments there. Oh, sorry.
I think you all have some really great comments there. And I think the public that live around there are really, they know that area better than any of us. Enforcement every 2 hours, respectfully, would be really difficult to do. And if we're going to make it every 2 hours, we have to enforce it. So I would recommend that council writes a letter to William Head and to the buses. I think that's two big components, an easy thing that we can do. I think that we can get an agreement with the tow company and start towing. Because honestly, the year that we started towing, that did really quiet things down in kind of in the Sandgate area and down at Taylor Road, because now the rumor is spread pretty quick that we were towing. And right now I have to call in the tow, but maybe that's something that we can get them to do more monitoring of the situation themselves. I think the big risk is not just the parking, it is the parking, but having people park on William Head Road is dangerous. It's just a high risk area. While again, like many of you have said, I don't want to push parking up onto Pearson College Drive, but that is a safer road to have parking. If we're going to put it up though, we have to provide an area for it. We can't just expect people to try and find it wherever. It has to be visual so they can see where to park. It's just, I don't know how all that's done, but we need to get them off William Head Road. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just not safe. I like the idea of rocks as opposed to the barriers, because the rocks you can kind of shift over a little bit, but don't take quite as much space, and it still allows for a safe walking area, a protected walking area, because that whole road along there, if you're walking from, if you're parking on Pearson College and you walk down to Sandgate, which many people do, that whole area is just very, very unsafe. If you look at Matheson Lake Road, if you push parking out, they park all the way halfway down Matheson Lake Road now. Like, it's crazy. So we've just made sure that it's only on one side of the road so we can still get fire apparatus down. And just touching on your point, Councillor Donaldson, we don't normally take an active fire apparatus to do enforcement. It tends to be my vehicle, just so that we make sure that we're not putting at risk the rest of the public just for doing parking enforcement. So throwing that out there. All right.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Thomas.
So in other areas where we've had concerns with speed on curves and stuff, in a number of neighborhoods in the district, we've used the white delineators. That might be something that's a little less obtrusive. I don't know, it's a bit institutional, but it might be a start. They are flexible as well.
Okay. Okay, so we have the four options here, but I'd like to include a fifth one, which is we consider, and Ms. Hanson, I'm going to read you something here, that additional options for signage and traffic management be considered. And that would be the fifth option. So that opens the doors to either the white delineators, the rocks, and or additional signage. In terms of, I think it's a neat idea to post something about where parking is available. That might be. Yeah. Although again, you know, I think one of the themes tonight is people they don't read signs so well. So yeah, but
Fair enough, but give them a chance. It sounds like a screwy place to be, and so if people think, gosh, I'll just slip in here versus, oh, that's where I'm supposed to park. I mean, it may help. I'm not saying it will, but worth a shot.
Okay. Meredith?
You know, I really have to, I'm quite passionate about this. I want to state this again. So if we're going to allow parking on the other side of the road, maybe we should reconsider what we're doing to the trail. Maybe you want to upgrade it for increased traffic. So we're doing one thing to make it a community trail, but then we're allowing parking in a very dangerous zone. And the fire chief, I mean, you really should pay attention to what the fire chief is saying. She's saying no parking along William Head there. Yeah. And I think we should heed her advice.
But Mary, just for clarification, there is parking that's free and there's no parking. There is parking allowed on Pearson College Drive, but along William Head Road, there are no parking signs. And they just so often get ignored. Like even the area across the road from where the trail is.
There's no parking zone. I can't remember. Actually, there is, I think, parking enough for about 3 vehicles. But people squeeze into that no parking zone. Yeah. I think it's ambiguous, and I think no parking should be allowed there.
Would you like a motion for your 4 items?
Well, thank you. I was going to. I wasn't sure somebody had made a motion, and I just forgot. So.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking this is a stepwise thing. Let's get going on it. And I think Mary Little's got a good point, but you guys have all taken a good look at it and studied it with a whole variety of people. Let's follow along. In other words, get these things done, see where we're at.
And Mary Little, I think your point is possibly covered in the 5th bullet there, that we look at additional options, and that may involve completely eliminating parking. And that's what I would like to see along that stretch of William Head Road as well. It's gone or severely. Yeah, I'd like to see it removed actually. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be a safe place to park. So, okay. So could I have a motion?
1, 2, 3. It's 5 points?
5 points, sure.
There are 4 points that are here, and then the 5th one was the additional options.
So I make a motion to accept the recommendations of the community planning, the 4 recommendations plus the 5th additional options for signage and traffic management.
Great. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Donaldson, and any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, I will call the question. Okay. All in favor? Thank you. One final note on this. We're pushing to 10. There's a much bigger discussion about how we manage access and enjoyment to our beaches. And I'd like to bring that to further planning committee meeting. And we'll talk about it again. And thanks to Ms. Jones and Ms. Panton for raising these questions. It is something we have to grapple with as a community. So, okay. Now, one final agenda to talk about here, and
Dogs and City Parks.
We have correspondence. And this is from Eric and Sheila Lunn regarding 4696 Beckingham Road. They've expressed concern about this subdivision proposal and the amenity zoning proposal, with a specific concern about water and the impacts to Hewitt Creek. So I did have a chance to talk to both Sheila, but especially Eric, and thought a little bit more about what their concerns were, and into my consideration of the proposal when it next comes to us. So, great. Thank you. Okay, so if you don't mind, could I have a motion to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock? So, Mayor Little and Councillor Donaldson, and all in favor? Okay, thank you very much. And, okay, so the next matter we put on other businesses, the question of dogs. And in this particular matter, we're talking about the incident that happened with Miss Summer earlier to her grandchild on Weedy Beach. But what it does is it raises a number of weird speech. Thank you. No, it was Weedy Beach, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was weird.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this situation, and I'm going to ask Chief Dunlop to jump in here too, because she knows this situation fairly well. So what I'm to understand is that the CRD, their jurisdiction goes to the high, through the park of course, but to the high tide line on the beach, of course. After that, from the high tide line to the low tide line, that is provincial jurisdiction. And apparently in that case, the municipality has the ability to manage what goes on in that sort of intertidal zone. Now, what the situation is, and Ms. Summer was good enough to show me the correspondence she had from the CRD, they are good to enforce up to that high tide line. But after that, they're not going to be there in terms of enforcing in terms of dogs off leash. And I'm trying to think now, and from June 1st till September 15th, all dogs must be on leash when they hit the beach area. And so you have a situation where there's a potential of dogs being off leash, and the potential for enforcement is kind of absolutely up in the air. Unless, and what's interesting, of course, is that we contract with CRD bylaw to do bylaw enforcement. So there's an issue there. But Chief, anything, sorry, I'm kind of slowing down a little bit, but is what I'm saying accurate in terms of where the jurisdictional lines are?
Yes.
Okay.
This is what I know from just the beach fire aspect.
Yeah.
Sorry, up there.
Okay.
So in responding or doing any enforcement in beach areas, we don't cover, for example, beach fire down at Whitty Beach. We go to it because they don't, CRD does not go into any beach fires that are down on the beach area because it is provincial, and then you get into federal. So we can go and we put out the fires. We can adhere our municipal policy. We can enforce our municipal policies on that area, but we do not ticket. We don't fine because it technically isn't our area. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, with the dogs, I've been bitten out there doing bylaw fires before, putting out beach fires, and had a dog come and attack me. So yeah, the dogs are an issue out there because people think that they can do whatever they want in that tidal area.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. What I would suggest is that there's a deeper conversation I think we have to have with the CRD, but I think we also have to look at what the options are for Metchosin in terms of enforcement on the beach areas. And in speaking with Ms. Summer, she made a really good point, is that the problem is not going to get any better. We are going to have visitors from the new arrivals in Royal Bay and the Central Mountain Estates development. Like, there will continue to be traffic there. What I would like to think is that if we don't have to be there each and every day, but if there's selected times that we can have some level of enforcement, and whether it's tickets or whether it's just somebody in a uniform being out there, not so much, educating, sure, but informing people that they have to have their dogs on a leash or at least under control. I think that might have an effect over time. But the question, of course, is how to do that and what budget do we have to do that. So I would propose that there be contact made with the CRD, and we work with staff and the fire chief as well, because she has experience in terms of managing issues on the beachfront, and we look at developing a plan for enforcement. So, Councillor Gray.
Sounds like a great idea. One thing that I do that Ms. Summers mentioned those, the signs are confusing. Could there be a first step to have a talk to the CRD and say, could the CRD change the sign and say dogs must be on a leash from June 1st to September, whatever the date, September 15th? Because I would think the average citizen hasn't the faintest idea about this jurisdictional issues. But if the signs say when you get there, this is the deal, and I'm expecting people not necessarily following every sign, but if the CRD would be open to that as a starter, in other words, not much more information except during this period of time we'd like your dogs to be on leash, or must be on leash. But I'm supporting your general notion of having a talk with everybody involved.
Great. Marilyn?
Yeah, as a CRD director, I think I could reach out to Ms. Hutchinson, Larissa Hutchinson, to ask her about this issue. Interestingly, so historically, we've convened this Dogs in Metchosin working group. They had a number of recommendations to our bylaw and a number of other recommendations. The past council accepted all those recommendations, and it's now pushed to this council to fully accept those. And so I hate to go against all of the work that had been done regarding defining under control, but I'm also in the position that I've now reached out to Saanich Council, and they had a consultant to do a report and a survey to the tune of $250,000. And they came up with the conclusion that dogs should be welcome on all of the beaches as long as they're leashed. And so I think that's something that we need to consider in the future if we continue to have these conflicts. What the Dogs in Metchosin working group was established because there were conflicts between wildlife and dogs, or livestock and dogs. And so we do have the ability to go to the Dogs in Metchosin working group to discuss this again, but I think a good step would be, as Councillor Gray suggested, to start at the CRD and to ask them. And there's also conflicts as well at Devonian, very, very similar, almost identical conflicts at another CRD park in Metchosin.
Thanks, Marilyn. And just considering the work that the Dogs in Metchosin working group did, I think the dog under control definition is wonderful. It seems to work, but it's pretty abstract in a situation where you need to enforce something, or the dog is not in control. And then, I mean, debating with the owner about that is really a futile thing. So I think, yeah, we need to look at some steps. But the potential of having dogs on leash in beaches, I think, might be something we have to look at. But of course, there's some other things that we can do first, whether it's education, enforcement, better signage. I think that would be worth looking at. But again, the problem is unlikely to get better. So what I would propose is, if I'm going to list this out. So in terms of action, that a call is made to the CRD and Marilyn. Oh, sorry, Councillor Harris.
I just want to add one more thing. I know when I've been out in the various parks throughout Metchosin, they're all a little bit different, Galapagos and the different beaches and some other ones. On the CRD one, specifically the Galapagos Trail, they do actually have, I don't know if rangers is the word, but they do have patrols on bicycles and that, and they definitely do talk to people with dogs on and off leash and that sort of thing. And it was a number of years ago, but they used to also set up information tables and stuff like that to talk to people. And I'm just wondering if they did a few of those at the beginning of summer, and now's a good time because it's June, and start getting people right at the entrance to these parks that are CRD parks. And I think signage is good. Not everybody's going to read them. I do, but that they start doing a little bit of PR so that people know that this is what is acceptable and this is what's not acceptable, and take some responsibility. But if they could reach out and do a bit of an education campaign, that certainly would be useful, because we're going to be having more and more visitors all the time. You know, the population growth in the West Shore is phenomenal. So
yeah. And a fabulous idea, and you need somebody that has some sort of authority or even just works at the CRD and is identified as a CRD person to actually make that stick. I really dislike the idea of individuals trying to educate people, especially when the dog is likely at large and not under control. That just simply leads to conflict, as I've had experience with. But Marilyn.
Another action item could be that we could reach out to the Dogs in Metchosin working group for them to start a campaign, an educational campaign, in terms of there's great expertise on that working group. And so they could, as they've suggested, write articles for the Metchosin News or the Goldstream Gazette. Probably the Goldstream Gazette would be a great idea, on what is proposed in the district and the problems that we're having, and to please have your dog under control or we will be facing leashing.
Great. Yeah, wonderful idea. Okay, I'm wondering if I could get a motion to do the following. That a call is put into the CRD to discuss this situation, and some of the topics may be discussion of signage and education campaigns as well as enforcement. That Metchosin have a closer look and clarify where its enforcement opportunities are. And again, that is below the high tide line to the low tide line where federal authority begins. And then contact is made with the Dogs in Metchosin working group about the potential of an educational campaign that they might be able to conceive of as supportive. So those 4 items. The one idea that I've always wondered about is whether there's room for almost an ambassador program where people, again, in identifiable vests, working in pairs or threes, tour around the parks, maybe in this case with their dogs in leash, and that's sort of an educational outlet. That may be something to consider. So, and it's just part of your dog walking routine. So, but okay. So those.
Yeah. CRD does that actually on horseback out towards Casinos and Souk, and they wear vests, and it's a bit cumbersome. There's a lot of paperwork to do and stuff, but that's what they were like, trail rangers on horseback, same sort of thing.
Yeah, it's, that's a great point. I mean, you don't do an ambassador program just super easily. There's some planning that would have to go into it. So, yeah. Ms. Hanson, do you think you have the? Great. Okay. So, could I have a motion to act on those 4 options, 3 options? Anybody? Marilyn. Seconded by Councillor Beck. And further discussion. No further discussion. I will call the question. All in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Okay. And I will take a motion to adjourn from Councillor Donaldson and from Councillor Beck. And all in favor? Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Council members, excuse me for breaking the tradition.